What if the greatest obstacle to your success has never been the world around you, but the hidden forces within your own mind? Every decision you make, every relationship you build, every conflict you face, and every ambition you pursue is shaped by patterns you rarely notice. In this complete audiobook, you'll uncover the timeless laws governing human behavior, from ego, envy, narcissism, manipulation, self-sabotage, aggression, and emotional blindness to purpose, influence, leadership, and the life-changing power of accepting mortality. Inspired by Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature, this journey reveals why people think, feel, and act the way they do, and more importantly, how you can master yourself before trying to master the world, because the person who truly understands human nature no longer reacts to life. They begin to shape it. Welcome to the complete journey. Chapter 1. The Law of Irrationality. Picture this. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're sitting alone in your room, wrapped in total silence. But inside your head, there is an absolute storm. The blue light from your smartphone reflects off your face as you stare at your bank account balance. Or maybe you're obsessing over an investment that's been draining your peace of mind for months. You feel this tight restlessness in your chest, a sudden wave of anxiety, and you ask yourself a question that every single one of us faces at some point. Am I doing the right thing, or am I making the biggest mistake of my life? When we look around, everyone seems to be doing something different. One person is dumping their entire life savings into the volatile stock market. Another is putting every penny into real estate. Meanwhile, someone more traditional is buying physical gold, locking it away safely in a vault. From the outside, it's easy to judge. We look at them and think, wow, those people are completely crazy. We assume they're either foolish for taking such massive risks or naive for letting their cash rot in a low-interest bank account. But tonight, let's address a profound truth. No one is actually crazy. The reality is, we like to believe we are completely logical, highly educated, and driven strictly by facts. But the ground truth, humans are deeply emotional creatures, and our feelings almost always pull the strings behind our decisions. The real danger isn't that we experience emotions. The danger is that after reacting emotionally, we look back and try to rationalize it by telling ourselves, I was just being realistic. See, irrationality doesn't mean you've lost your mind. It simply means your feelings are quietly steering the ship. And when emotion takes the steering wheel, your intellect is reduced to a mere passenger, left to justify whatever chaotic route you take. Think about how your brain works. It essentially operates at two different speeds. There is the slow, deliberate mind, the one that patiently analyzes data, checks facts, and looks at the bigger picture. And then there is the fast, impulsive mind, the one that instantly judges, slaps on a label, and forces you to react. This fast mind is completely fueled by raw emotion. When you are emotionally charged, your brain stops looking for the truth. Instead, it aggressively hunts for evidence just to prove your current mood is right. Imagine you're at work and your manager praises a project but forgets to mention your name. It's just a casual passing comment. The rest of your team is smiling and you force a smile too. But internally, a sharp spike of resentment hits you. They just took credit for my hard work. Now, it's entirely possible it was an accident, or maybe they were just in a rush. But your ego, mixed with a hint of insecurity, immediately chooses the darkest storyline available. You open your laptop, your fingers fly across the keyboard, and you draft an email. The words might look polite on paper, but the underlying tone is laced with passive-aggressive frustration. You hit send, and hours later, when the dust settles, the regret kicks in. Whenever we let our immediate emotions dictate our actions, we consistently lose three vital things: our timing, our accuracy, and our connections. We react at the wrong moment, we mistake a fleeting feeling for an absolute fact, and we burn bridges before even trying to understand the other person's perspective. The law of irrationality isn't here to make you perfect, it's here to make you brutally honest with yourself. It asks you to pause, step back, and realize that your initial emotions might be misleading you. When you learn to observe your feelings rather than immediately acting on them, the emotional wave no longer drags you down. It simply washes over you and passes away. You stop letting your impulses script your destiny, and you finally become the true master of your mind. Now let us dig deeper into the mechanics of why we do this. Why does a sophisticated modern human brain default to such self-destructive patterns? To understand this, we have to look at the invisible forces that constantly warp our reality. These are our cognitive biases, the internal filters that color everything we see, hear, and feel. The first and most powerful filter is what psychologists call the confirmation bias. When you are upset, hurt, or even overly excited, your brain forms an immediate conclusion. For instance, if you believe a friend is ignoring you, your fast mind instantly locks that in as the truth. From that exact moment onward, your brain goes on a selective hunt. It actively looks for clues to validate your pain. A delayed text response, proof. A subtle shift in their tone, absolute proof. But what about the fact that they might just be overwhelmed with work or going through a personal crisis? Your emotional mind completely ignores that data because it doesn't align with the narrative you've already chosen. We don't look for the objective truth, we look for the truth that makes our feelings feel justified. Then comes the conviction bias. This is the dangerous illusion that the sheer intensity of your emotion makes it real. We often tell ourselves, if I feel this strongly about it, I must be right. If you feel a deep, burning anger towards someone, your brain convinces you that your anger is a direct reflection of their malice. But intensity does not equal accuracy. A loud emotion can be completely wrong, just as a quiet truth can be entirely accurate. When you operate under conviction bias, you lose the ability to question yourself, and that is precisely when the most catastrophic mistakes are made. But there is another layer to this trap, and it happens every time we open our social media feeds. Think about how you feel when you're scrolling late at night. You see a classmate from years ago posting pictures of their new luxury car, or a colleague celebrating a massive career milestone. Instantly, you feel a tiny pinch in your chest, then another, and before you know it, a heavy wave of bitterness washes over you. You might tell yourself, "Oh, I don't really care about show-offs." But your actions tell a different story. You start scrolling faster, your mood turns sour, and suddenly, innocent comments from other people start to annoy you. A friend's genuine success begins to look like arrogance. A relative's harmless question feels like an interrogation. What just happened there? Your emotional state was triggered by a single image, and it completely hijacked your perspective for the rest of the night. You didn't realize it, but you let an external digital trigger rewrite the emotional code of your entire evening. This brings us to the core issue of human friction. We are constantly fighting enemies that don't exist. In moments of high emotional tension, your real enemy isn't the person sitting across from you. It isn't your boss, it isn't your partner, and it certainly isn't the stranger on the internet. Your true enemy is your own sense of urgency. It is that desperate, clawing instinct inside you that screams, "You must react right now. You must defend your honor this very second." This urgency is a survival mechanism left over from our primitive ancestors. Thousands of years ago, if a predator appeared, waiting to analyze the situation meant death. You had to react instantly, but in the modern world where the threats are psychological rather than physical, that same urgent reflex is what ruins careers, shatters relationships, and destroys mental peace. To break free from the law of irrationality, you must train yourself to create a gap, a buffer zone between the stimulus and your response. The next time you feel a sudden spike of anger, a sudden drop in confidence, or a wave of bitter envy, do absolutely nothing. Do not send the text, do not draft the email, do not make the comment. Force yourself to wait. Let the biological chemical reaction in your body cool down. Because emotions are like waves, they peak with incredible power, but if you give them just a little bit of time, they are legally bound to recede. When you learn to sit with your discomfort without reacting to it, you reclaim your power. You transition from being a reactive puppet of your environment to becoming a conscious observer of your life. You begin to see people not as threats, but as flawed individuals who are also fighting their own internal battles. And in doing so, you don't just protect your peace, you conquer the chaotic nature of the human mind. To truly master the chaos of our inner mind, we must expose the deep-seated illusions that keep us trapped in irrational loops. Most people live under the false impression that they are entirely self-aware. They believe that when they make a decision, they have carefully weighed the pros and cons, analyzed the risks, and chosen the most logical path. But if we peel back the layers of human psychology, we discover that what we call logic is often just a highly sophisticated defense mechanism designed to protect our ego. Consider how we handle our failures and mistakes. When something goes wrong in our lives, whether a business venture fails, a relationship falls apart, or a career opportunity slips through our fingers, our immediate instinctive reaction is to look outward. The brain immediately starts constructing a protective shield. It tells you that the market was bad, the other person was toxic, the system was rigged, or it was just a terrible stroke of bad luck. This is the classic blame bias. Your fast-processing mind cannot handle the sudden drop in self-esteem that comes with admitting a personal error, so it immediately projects the guilt onto an external target. You create a beautifully logical narrative to explain your failure, and you believe it completely. But this narrative is not the truth. It is simply a psychological painkiller. By refusing to look into the mirror and analyze your own blind spots, you guarantee that you will repeat the exact same mistake in your next venture. Another powerful force that quietly warps our judgment is the appearance bias. We are visual creatures, deeply influenced by surface-level impressions. When we meet someone who is highly charismatic, attractive, or soft-spoken, our brains automatically assign positive traits to them that they might not even possess. We assume they are trustworthy, competent, and honest simply because they project a pleasing image. Conversely, if someone is awkward, blunt, or dressed poorly, we immediately dismiss their insights, no matter how valuable they might be. Con artists and master manipulators understand this flaw perfectly. They don't win your trust with superior logic. They win it by manufacturing an appearance that perfectly aligns with your desires and expectations. They wear the right clothes, speak with the right level of confidence, and mirror your body language. Your emotional mind is completely blinded by the spectacle, while your rational mind is silenced. By the time you realize you've been misled, the damage is already done. You didn't fail because you lacked intelligence. You failed because you allowed your emotional reaction to an appearance to override your critical thinking. Then we must look at the illusion of group bias. As humans, we possess a primal need to belong to a tribe. Thousands of years ago, being exiled from the group meant certain death. So our brains evolved to conform to the collective will. In the modern world, this manifests as an intense psychological pressure to adopt the opinions, beliefs, and biases of the social groups we belong to. Whether it is a political ideology, a corporate culture, or an online community, we quietly align our thoughts with the crowd to avoid social discomfort. When your group expresses outrage over an issue, you feel a sudden surge of outrage too. When they celebrate something, you feel compelled to celebrate. You convince yourself that you genuinely share these views based on your own independent thinking. But the reality is much darker. You are simply riding the emotional wave of the collective. The moment you adopt a belief just to feel safe within a group, you surrender your individuality and enter a state of functional irrationality. To build a genuinely bulletproof mindset, you must learn to recognize these biases the exact moment they enter your consciousness. You must develop what psychologists call the observing ego. This means splitting your awareness into two parts during moments of tension. One part of you experiences the emotion, the anger, the pride, the insecurity, while the other part calmly stands back and observes the reaction like an outside scientist. When someone criticizes your work, instead of instantly snapping back or writing a defensive reply, your observing ego steps in and notes, "Right now my heart rate is rising. I feel a sharp sting of pride. My brain is trying to find a flaw in this person just to discredit their opinion." The moment you name the emotion, you detach yourself from it. It loses its power over you. You are no longer the anger. You are simply the person observing the anger. This shift in perspective is where true mental freedom begins. You stop being a reactive machine that can be easily triggered by a single comment, a bad email, or a piece of bad news. You begin to see through the strategic maneuvers of manipulative people, and more importantly, you see through the deception of your own ego. You achieve a rare state of quiet clarity, a sharp, unshakable focus that allows you to make decisions based on objective reality rather than temporary emotional turbulence. This is the ultimate goal of understanding human nature: to conquer the illusions of the self so you can finally navigate the world with true wisdom. Once you develop the ability to observe your own mind, you begin to notice a deeper, more subtle pattern of human irrationality. It is the illusion of control. Most people move through life believing they have a firm grip on their destiny. They create meticulous 5-year plans, make strict financial projections, and assume that if they just follow a specific formula, reality will perfectly bend to their will. But this belief is often tested when unexpected chaos hits. A sudden market crash, a sudden health crisis, or a sudden betrayal from a trusted partner can shatter that illusion in a matter of seconds. When humans realize they cannot control external events, their fast mind triggers a state of deep anxiety. To cope with this discomfort, we often default to a psychological trap known as the superstition bias. We start looking for magical shortcuts, or we place absolute blind faith in charismatic figures who promise us guaranteed certainty. We look for someone, anyone, who can tell us exactly what the future holds, just so we can escape the painful reality of the unknown. But true rationality requires you to accept a hard, uncomfortable truth. You cannot control the wind, you can only adjust your sails. The only thing you have absolute control over is your inner state, your focus, your response, and your mindset. When you stop wasting your emotional energy trying to control things outside of your perimeter, you unlock a massive reservoir of mental clarity. You stop panicking over every unpredictable shift in the environment, and instead you focus entirely on executing the highest quality decision in the present moment. This brings us to the final, most dangerous illusion of all, the illusion of superiority. Deep down, almost every human being harbors a secret belief that they are fundamentally better, wiser, and more ethical than the people around them. We look at the mistakes of our peers and think, "I would never be that foolish." We look at someone trapped in a bad relationship or a failed business and assume it's a direct result of their lack of character. This quiet arrogance blinds us to our own flaws. It creates a massive psychological blind spot, making us completely vulnerable to the exact same traps we judge others for. True emotional mastery begins with radical humility. You must look into the mirror and accept that under the right amount of pressure, stress, or isolation, you are capable of the exact same irrational behavior as anyone else. You are not immune to greed, you are not immune to envy, and you are not immune to fear. The moment you discard the illusion of superiority, a profound shift happens within you. You stop judging people, and you start analyzing them. Instead of getting angry at a colleague's toxic behavior or a friend's sudden coldness, you look past the surface presentation. You ask yourself, what internal bias is driving this person right now? What deep-seated insecurity are they trying to protect? When you view the world through this lens, your relationships completely transform. You stop taking things personally. You realize that when people lash out, it is rarely about you. It is almost always an outward projection of their own internal chaos. This realization grants you an elite, psychological edge. While everyone else is reacting, shouting, and burning connections in a state of emotional urgency, you remain perfectly still, watching the chessboard of human nature with absolute precision. To bring this foundational law to its absolute peak, we must understand how to transition from a state of reactive chaos into a state of high rationality. True rationality is not about suppressing your emotions, nor is it about turning yourself into a cold, unfeeling machine. Emotions are a beautiful, necessary part of the human experience. They give life its color, its passion, and its drive. The goal is not to kill your feelings, but to completely change your relationship with them. You must learn to hold your emotions in your hand, examine them with total curiosity, and decide whether they deserve to influence your behavior. Think of your mind as a grand kingdom. For most of your life, your impulses, fears, and temporary moods have acted like rebellious warlords, constantly hijacking the throne and making reckless decisions that leave your kingdom in ruins. Becoming rational means taking back the crown. It means establishing your intellect as the ultimate ruler, while your emotions serve as valuable advisors that provide data but never hold the final vote. When you achieve this level of mental discipline, you unlock what can only be described as a quiet, unshakable power. You no longer look at the world through the fractured lens of your ego. When a crisis hits, while everyone else is panicking, pointing fingers, and making the situation worse, you possess the rare ability to pause. You step back, breathe through the initial wave of urgency, and look at the cold, hard facts. You analyze the variables, anticipate the long-term consequences, and execute your strategy with absolute focus. This is the exact mindset that separates the legendary creators, leaders, and thinkers from the rest of the crowd. They are not smarter than everyone else. They have simply mastered the art of outweighting their emotional impulses. They know that a temporary feeling should never be allowed to dictate a permanent destination. As we close this first chapter, carry this ultimate truth with you. Your mind is the most powerful tool you will ever own, but only if you are the one operating it. Stop letting a single bad text message, a corporate oversight, or a stray social media post dictate the trajectory of your days. Recognize your biases, embrace radical humility, create that vital buffer zone between what you feel and how you act. By conquering the law of irrationality, you don't just survive the chaotic nature of the world, you rise above it. You secure your inner peace, protect your vision, and finally step into the full power of your potential. The mirror has been held up, the rules of the game have been exposed, and the steering wheel is finally back in your hands. Episode 1 now ends. Chapter 2. The Law of Narcissism. Transforming self-love into empathy. Have you ever walked into a crowded room and felt like the entire gravity of the space was revolving around just one specific person? Sometimes that person is you. Other times it's a colleague, a friend, or a complete stranger. But there is a strange illusion when it comes to narcissism. It rarely feels like a mirror. Instead, it feels like a powerful, blinding spotlight, a light that makes whoever it shines upon feel like the absolute center of the universe. The ultimate tragedy of narcissism is that it aggressively demands appreciation, but the desperate, needy behavior behind it eventually exhausts everyone around you, leaving you completely isolated. To understand this law, we must accept a fundamental truth about human nature. We are all to some degree narcissists. It is a deeply ingrained survival mechanism. From the moment we are born, our brains are wired to focus on our own survival, our own comfort, and our own desires. When we are infants, this self-centered focus is complete. We cry, and the world must answer. We hurt, and it is the only crisis that matters. But as we grow older, reality forces us to realize that we are not the only characters in the story. We enter a massive world filled with billions of other individuals, each operating with their own egos, their own fears, and their own desperate desire to be seen. This creates a severe psychological challenge. How do we balance our deep primal need for self-love with the reality that the world does not revolve around us? Most people handle this tension by building a carefully curated image of themselves, a social mask. We want people to see us as competent, successful, kind, or uniquely talented. In the modern world, this mask is perfectly reflected in our social media profiles. We post our highlights, our achievements, and our perfect moments, waiting anxiously for the world to validate our existence through likes, views, and comments. But there is a massive difference between healthy self-regard and deep toxic narcissism. A person with healthy self-esteem has a solid internal anchor. They know their worth, they accept their flaws, and because they feel secure within themselves, they possess the mental space to look outward and genuinely care about others. But a toxic narcissist has no internal anchor. Beneath their loud confidence and grand exterior lies a deeply fragile, hollow core. They are completely dependent on a continuous stream of external validation just to feel alive. And when that stream dries up, their entire world crumbles into a state of aggressive insecurity. When a person falls into the trap of deep toxic narcissism, their entire interaction with reality becomes transactional. They no longer see people as independent individuals with their own complex emotions, struggles, and dreams. Instead, they view others merely as extensions of themselves, tools or instruments meant to serve their ego, provide attention, or validate their superiority. This creates a highly dangerous dynamic in relationships. A toxic narcissist will initially charm you, drawing you into their spotlight with intense affection and grand promises. But the moment you express an independent thought, voice a criticism, or demand that your own emotional needs be met, the vibe instantly shifts. Suddenly you are no longer a partner, you are a threat. Because their internal core is so fragile, they cannot handle the discomfort of not being validated. They will immediately manipulate the narrative, play the victim, or use emotional guilt to force you back into submission. The true tragedy of this behavior is that it always backfires. People eventually grow exhausted by the endless neediness and the emotional drainage. One by one, friends drift away, partners walk out, and colleagues distance themselves. The narcissist is left trapped in the very nightmare they were trying to escape, complete and utter isolation. And yet their ego will still play its favorite magic trick, convincing them that they aren't the problem. The world is simply too envious or incapable of understanding their greatness. To break free from this self-destructive cycle, we must learn to activate the ultimate human superpower, deep empathy. Empathy is not just about being nice or feeling sorry for someone. True empathy is a strategic, conscious skill. It is the ability to completely step out of your own ego, lay down your personal biases, and step directly into the inner world of another human being. It means watching a person's behavior, their subtle facial expressions, the tone of their voice, their sudden deflections, and asking yourself, what are they actually feeling right now? What is the unspoken story behind their actions? When you shift your focus from how do I look to them to what are they going through, your entire psychological frequency changes. You stop projecting your own insecurities onto every conversation. You unlock a rare magnetic charisma that cannot be faked. Because in a world where everyone is desperately screaming to be noticed, the person who genuinely takes the time to listen, understand, and validate others becomes the most powerful and respected presence in the room. To truly master the skill of empathy, we have to understand that it doesn't happen automatically. It requires consistent, deliberate practice. Most people operate on what is called passive empathy. They only feel for others when a tragedy is obvious or when it directly hits close to home. But elite psychological mastery demands active empathy. Active empathy means treating every human interaction like an unexplored territory. When you speak to a colleague, a client, or a family member, you must train your mind to look past the surface level of their words. Humans are masters of disguise. We rarely say exactly what we mean. When someone cracks a sharp, sarcastic joke, or when they suddenly become overly defensive about a minor critique, passive observers just see attitude, but an active empath sees the hidden distress signal. They realize that sarcasm is often a shield for deep-seated insecurity, and defensiveness is almost always a frantic attempt to protect a bruised ego. The moment you start reading people at this level, you gain a massive strategic advantage. You stop reacting to their emotional outbursts. If a business partner gets angry during a negotiation, your ego won't rise to match their hostility. Instead, you remain perfectly calm, analyzing the root cause of their panic. You see that their anger isn't an attack on you, it's a desperate reaction to a perceived loss of control. By addressing their underlying need for security rather than fighting their outward hostility, you smoothly de-escalate the tension and steer the situation exactly where you want it to go. But the ultimate test of this law is turning this empathetic lens inward, directly onto yourself. You must develop the radical honesty to catch your own narcissistic tendencies before they sabotage your life. Ask yourself the hard questions. Am I listening to this person because I genuinely want to understand them? Or am I just waiting for my turn to speak and talk about myself? Am I helping this friend out of pure generosity? Or do I secretly just want the praise and validation that comes with being a savior? Catching these subtle, ego-driven motives within yourself isn't meant to make you feel guilty. It's meant to set you free. The moment you expose the secret demands of your own ego, it loses its power to control you. You stop being a slave to the desperate need for attention, and you finally unlock the freedom to build deep, unbreakable connections that stand the test of time. As you deepen your practice of active empathy, you will begin to notice that human narcissism manifests in various shapes and sizes. It is not always loud, boastful, or arrogant. In fact, one of the most dangerous forms of this trait is what psychologists call the passive-aggressive or victim narcissist. These individuals don't look for validation by flexing their power or success. Instead, they gain attention by highlighting their suffering. They position themselves as the ultimate martyr in every scenario. If a project fails, they are always the ones who were sabotaged. If a relationship ends, they were the only ones who truly cared. They use their vulnerability and wounds as a psychological weapon to manipulate you, making you feel responsible for their emotional well-being. When you encounter a victim narcissist, your passive empathy will tempt you to step in and save them. But an elite understanding of human nature warns you to step back. You must realize that their suffering is tied directly to their identity. They don't want solutions, they want an endless supply of pity and attention. By recognizing this pattern early, you protect yourself from being dragged into their emotional quicksand, allowing you to maintain clear, firm boundaries while keeping your mental peace intact. This brings us to the ultimate resolution of the law of narcissism. True confidence is never loud. It doesn't need to post its every achievement on a digital screen, and it doesn't require a room full of people to clap just to feel validated. True confidence is a quiet, unshakable certainty. It is the state of being so deeply anchored in your own self-worth, your own skills, and your own reality that you no longer need to use people as mirrors to check if you look important. When you reach this state of quiet confidence, your worldview completely opens up. You stop walking into rooms wondering, what do they think of me? And you start asking, what can I learn from them? You transition from a desperate seeker of attention into a powerful observer of reality. You become the person who listens deeply, connects authentically, and commands absolute respect without ever having to raise your voice or demand the spotlight. You step out of the fragile cage of self-obsession, and you finally inherit the keys to understanding the entire human kingdom. To bring this profound law to its absolute destination, we must realize that the shift from self-obsession to deep empathy is the ultimate evolution of a mature mind. It is the path to achieving true magnetic influence over the world around you. When you break free from the constant need to feed your own ego, you gain a level of emotional clarity that very few people ever experience. You no longer see the world as a battlefield where you must constantly defend your image or prove your superiority. Instead, the world becomes a fascinating gallery of human stories. Every person you meet, no matter how difficult, quiet, or complex they seem, becomes a living book waiting to be read. By mastering the law of narcissism, you build an internal fortress that cannot be shaken by external opinions. If someone praises you, it doesn't inflate your ego to the point of arrogance. If someone criticizes you, it doesn't shatter your self-worth or send you into a spiral of defensive rage. You remain perfectly centered, secure in who you are, while fully capable of understanding who they are. As we conclude this second chapter, remember this core truth. The spotlight of your mind was never meant to be turned inward, blinding you with self-absorption. It was meant to be turned outward, to illuminate the hidden depths of human nature, to heal broken connections, and to navigate the complexities of life with profound wisdom. Lay down your mask, step out of the mirror, and step into the incredible power of true empathy. Episode 2 now ends. Chapter 3. The Law of Role-Playing. See through people's masks. Every single day, the moment we step out of our homes, we step onto a grand global stage. Without even realizing it, we transform into actors. We don costume after costume, adjusting our lines, tempering our expressions, and playing specific roles that society expects from us. We play the diligent employee, the supportive partner, the confident leader, or the harmless friend. We wear these psychological masks not out of malice, but out of necessity. It is the social lubricant that keeps the gears of civilization running smoothly without grinding against each other. But the danger arises when we forget that we are surrounded by performers. Most people make the critical mistake of taking everything at face value. When someone smiles warmly at them, they assume it's a reflection of genuine affection. When someone speaks with absolute humility, they assume it's a reflection of an honest soul. They listen only to the words being spoken, completely blind to the subtle, hidden script operating beneath the surface. To master the law of role-playing, you must train your eyes to see past the performance. You must realize that a person's words are carefully filtered through their conscious brain. They say what they want you to believe. If you want to unlock the objective truth about who they are, you have to stop listening with just your ears and start observing with your intellect. You must shift your focus toward the things they cannot easily control, their nonverbal cues, their micro-expressions, and their instinctual reactions under pressure. Think of it as developing a second layer of vision. When you look at a person playing a role, you are no longer blinded by the brilliance of their mask. Instead, you begin to look for the tiny cracks where the mask inevitably slips, because no matter how skilled the actor is, no human being can maintain a perfect performance indefinitely. The truth always leaks out, leaking through a sudden shift in their tone, a fleeting shadow in their eyes, or an unscripted gesture that lasts for less than a fraction of a second. Mastering this law means becoming the director of the scene, quietly sitting in the audience, decoding every single movement on the stage of life. To decode the true nature of the performers around us, we must first learn how to read the body's hidden vocabulary. While the mouth is highly trained to lie, the human nervous system is remarkably honest. When a person is acting out a role that contradicts their true internal state, their body experiences a subtle form of friction. This psychological friction always manifests as a leak, a physical tell that betrays the performance. The first place to look for these leaks is in the eyes. We often look at a smiling face and assume everything is well. But a conscious observer looks closer. They analyze the muscles around the eyes, a genuine smile of warmth or joy, what scientists call a Duchenne smile, always engages the muscles at the outer corners, creating tiny, natural crinkles. A forced or performative smile, however, only activates the muscles around the mouth. The rest of the face remains strangely cold and dead. If someone is complimenting your success, but their eyes remain wide, fixed, and completely unbothered by that natural warmth, you are not witnessing admiration. You are witnessing a mask of politeness, masking a cold indifference or secret envy. The second, and perhaps most honest zone of the body, is the hands and feet. Because we spend so much energy monitoring our facial expressions, we completely forget about our lower extremities. When someone is trying to project absolute confidence and calm during a meeting, their upper body might look perfectly composed, but beneath the table, their feet might be pointed directly toward the exit door, or their hands might be tightly gripping their own thumbs, an instinctual self-soothing gesture that indicates high internal stress or anxiety. The body is practically screaming its discomfort, even while the voice remains steady and controlled. But reading these individual signals is only half the battle. To avoid making critical errors in judgment, you must establish what is known as a baseline. Every human being has a unique set of natural quirks. Some people naturally blink faster, some talk with their hands constantly, and others naturally maintain less eye contact. An amateur mistakes a single nervous gesture as a sign of deception. An elite observer, however, first studies how a person behaves when they are completely relaxed and under zero pressure. Once you establish that baseline of comfort, you don't look for generic signs of lying. You look for sudden deviations from that baseline. The moment the topic of conversation changes and their natural rhythm abruptly shifts, that is the exact coordinates of the crack in their mask. Once you master the art of establishing a baseline and detecting physical leaks, you must upgrade your observation skills to detect the deeper, psychological masks that people wear to consciously manipulate their environment. These are not just momentary tells, these are full-scale manufactured personalities designed to gain power, sympathy, or unearned trust. The first major psychological mask you will encounter on the global stage is the mask of extreme humility. In any professional or social setting, you will run into individuals who go completely out of their way to project an image of absolute selflessness. They constantly downplay their achievements, praise everyone else in the room, and speak in a tone that suggests they are entirely without ego. They want the world to view them as saint-like figures who only live to serve. But a deep understanding of human nature requires you to look beneath this heavy layer of modesty. True humility is quiet, natural, and unadvertised. When humility becomes performance, when a person is constantly reminding you of how humble they are, it is almost always a defensive shield. Beneath that soft, polite exterior often lies a massive, hypersensitive ego that cannot handle direct competition or criticism. By pretending to be small, they protect themselves from being attacked, while quietly manipulating others into giving them the constant validation they crave. If you cross a person wearing the mask of false humility, or if you challenge their hidden authority, that soft persona will instantly vanish, replaced by a cold, calculating resentment that will shock you. The second highly effective psychological mask you will frequently encounter is the mask of aggressive honesty. We live in a cautious world where everyone carefully filters their speech, so when someone enters our lives speaking with brutal, unfiltered bluntness, our natural instinct is to trust them. We tell ourselves, well, they might be rude, but at least they are honest. They say exactly what's on their mind. Master manipulators understand this loophole perfectly. They consciously adopt a rough, blunt tone to bypass your natural defenses. By pretending to have no filter, they create a powerful illusion of absolute transparency. They use this engineered trust to make you believe their intentions are pure. But if you watch closely, you will notice a dark pattern. Their brutal honesty is almost always a one-way street. They love delivering harsh truths to others under the guise of just trying to help. But the exact moment you try to give them a taste of their own medicine, their face tightens, their defenses go up, and they treat your objective feedback as a declaration of war. Their bluntness isn't a reflection of honesty. It is simply a socially acceptable weapon they use to dominate the room. To pierce through these sophisticated masks, you cannot rely on passive observation. You must learn to actively test the mask by creating controlled moments of pressure. One of the most effective ways to do this is through the tool of calculated disagreement. When you are dealing with someone whose true motives you cannot read, do not simply agree with them to keep the peace. Instead, wait for a non-critical point in the conversation and gently but firmly offer an opposing view. Do not be hostile, just be objective. Then completely stop talking and closely analyze their immediate instinctual reaction. A person who is genuinely secure will welcome the dialogue, but a person who is playing a highly calculated role will experience a brief internal panic. Because their mask is a rigid structure built on total control, your disagreement acts like an unscripted tear in their play. Look for that microsecond of tight tension in their jaw, the sudden narrowing of their eyes, or a subtle sharpness in their tone before they force themselves back into their polite persona. That tiny fraction of a second where their composure slipped, that is the raw, unedited truth of their character breaking through the performance. Mastering the theater of human nature does not mean you become cynical, nor does it mean you stop trusting the world. It simply means you refuse to be naive. When you develop the clarity to see through people's masks, you are no longer at the mercy of their performances. You become immune to the charm of false saints and the intimidation of false leaders. The ultimate goal of the law of role-playing is to achieve a state of strategic detachment. When someone enters your life and starts putting on an elaborate show, your ego should never get involved. You don't need to call them out, you don't need to argue, and you certainly don't need to tear their mask off in public. Tearing off someone's mask only forces them into a corner, making them your permanent enemy. Instead, you simply sit back, enjoy the performance, and quietly collect the data. You let them play their role, while you make your strategic moves based entirely on the cold, hard reality of their baseline actions. At the same time, this law grants you absolute mastery over your own presentation. Once you understand the rules of the stage, you can consciously choose when to wear a mask and when to take it off. You don't wear a mask to deceive, you wear it to protect your privacy, navigate difficult environments, and connect with people on a level they can understand. As we close this third chapter, let this be your ultimate advantage. Let the rest of the world get lost in the noise of empty words, forced smiles, and scripted behavior. You, however, will look past the stage lights. You will see the cracks, read the leaks, and decode the hidden motives with absolute precision. The curtain is up, the actors are in place, but you are no longer just a member of the audience, you are the master decoder of the human script. Episode 3 now ends. Chapter 4. The Law of Compulsive Behavior. Determine the strength of people's character. When we look for people to work with, partner with, or bring into our inner circles, we easily fall in love with their surface qualities. We get charmed by their brilliant intelligence, their sharp humor, or their massive charisma. But human nature hides a dangerous trap. These outward traits are not a reflection of a person's inner strength. Underneath the layer of charm lies a much more powerful hidden force that dictates their entire life, their character. Character is something deeply etched into the core of an individual. It is formed by their childhood experiences, their deepest habits, and the hardwired neurosis of their brain. Most people believe they can change their ways whenever they want. They make promises, they sign contracts, and they swear they will never repeat the same mistakes. But the law of compulsive behavior proves otherwise. When the pressure rises, when a crisis strikes, or when they face sudden temptation, their conscious control instantly slips away. In those critical moments, people don't act rationally. Instead, they compulsively fall back into their oldest, most deeply ingrained patterns of behavior. They are practically compelled to repeat the exact same self-destructive cycles over and over again, completely trapped by their own past. To read a person's true character, you must learn to ignore their words and analyze their history. Character is a compulsive force, meaning it leaves a clear trail of repetitive patterns over time. If someone has betrayed their previous partners, lost every job due to conflicts with authority, or consistently walked out when things got tough, they will inevitably do the exact same thing to you. No matter how much they claim they have changed, or how heavily they blame their past bad luck on others, their core blueprint remains completely untouched. We often make the critical mistake of believing that a person's mistakes are just isolated incidents. We tell ourselves it was just a one-time slip. But in the laboratory of human nature, there is no such thing as a random mistake. Every action is a direct symptom of their internal wiring. When you observe someone under normal circumstances, their mask is secure. But when you observe them in moments of high stress, sudden success, or minor irritations, you see the real machinery at work. Look at how they handle a minor delay, how they treat a waiter, or how they react when they lose a simple game. These tiny, unscripted moments reveal whether they possess a fragile defensive character or a strong, adaptable spine that can withstand the storms of life. When we evaluate human character, we can broadly divide it into two primary categories: weak character and strong character. Knowing how to differentiate between these two blueprints is the ultimate shield against deception. A weak character is defined by a deep lack of internal structure. People with weak character are like leaves in the wind. They are entirely controlled by external circumstances, immediate pleasures, and their own shifting emotions. They cannot tolerate any form of friction, anxiety, or criticism. The moment they encounter a complex obstacle, their first instinct is to look for an easy way out, a scapegoat to blame, or a shortcut to save their fragile image. You cannot build a stable house on a weak foundation, and you can never build a reliable partnership with a weak character. They might be highly creative, brilliant, or incredibly charming when things are going perfectly smooth, but the exact moment the project faces a critical delay or an unexpected financial storm, their internal machinery collapses. They will panic, they will point fingers, and they will abandon you to protect themselves. A strong character, on the other hand, is forged from a completely different material. It is defined by an incredible level of resilience, adaptability, and deep self-retrieval. When you deal with an individual of strong character, you are dealing with a solid anchor. They do not lose their minds when a crisis strikes. Instead, they become remarkably quiet, focused, and analytical. They have the rare capacity to absorb a heavy blow, take full responsibility for their mistakes, and learn from the pain instead of running away from it. They can listen to a harsh truth without letting their ego shatter, and they can hold their ground under extreme pressure without compromising their core values. This is the rarest and most valuable human currency on earth. To truly master this law, you must understand that people with weak characters often develop highly sophisticated coping mechanisms to hide their lack of internal strength. They don't walk around showing their fragility. Instead, they cover it with a brilliant armor of overcompensation. One of the most common types you will encounter is the hyper-aggressive personality. These individuals love to yell, dominate conversations, and project an image of absolute unshakable power. But a deep observer knows that real strength is quiet. Their loud aggression is simply a desperate smokescreen designed to terrify you, so that you never look close enough to see the terrified, insecure child hiding behind their mask. Another deceptive manifestation of a weak character is the perpetual pleaser. These people are incredibly polite, always smiling, and will agree with every single word you say. They will promise you the moon just to avoid a moment of awkward tension or disagreement. But their loyalty is entirely superficial. Because they lack a solid internal spine, they cannot stand up for you when you are not in the room. The moment someone else applies pressure on them or offers them a better deal, their loyalty will instantly dissolve. They will betray you not because they hate you, but simply because their weak character cannot tolerate the discomfort of saying no to someone else. Your ultimate objective in life must be to hyper-focus your attention on finding and retaining individuals who possess a strong character. When you find them, you must treat them as priceless treasures. Whether you are building a professional team, choosing a business partner, or selecting a lifelong friend, character must always be your number one metric. You can easily teach a person a new skill. You can upgrade their technical knowledge and you can give them resources, but you can never fix a broken character. That blueprint is permanent. The final and most liberating step in mastering the law of compulsive behavior is turning this analytical lens completely inward toward your own soul. We are all deeply flawed human beings, and every single one of us carries our own set of repetitive, self-destructive patterns. True wisdom begins the exact moment you stop denying your own programming and courageously look into the mirror of your past actions. You must identify your own compulsive triggers, the specific situations that make you lose your emotional balance, and the toxic loops you repeatedly fall into. You cannot rewrite your childhood experiences, and you cannot completely erase your hardwired habits overnight. But through the power of intense self-awareness, you can break the automatic compulsion. When you recognize a negative pattern starting to emerge in a moment of crisis, you gain the golden opportunity to hit the pause button. You force your brain to step out of the automatic track and make a conscious, rational choice. This conscious intervention is the exact mechanism through which a weak character slowly transforms into a strong, resilient character over time. As we conclude this fourth chapter, let this profound truth be engraved in your mind forever. Fate is not an invisible hand tracking from the heavens, nor is it a matter of random cosmic luck. Your character is your fate. The invisible internal blueprint that dictates how you react to pressure, how you handle success, and how you treat others is the exact force that will either destroy your life or elevate it to unprecedented heights. Stop wasting your energy chasing surface charm and start investing your time in building an unshakable inner foundation. Master your compulsions, decode the character of those around you, and take absolute control of your destiny. Episode 4 now ends. Chapter 5: The Law of Covetousness. We live in a culture that encourages comparison. From the moment we are born, we are taught to look at others, what they have, how they look, and how much success they have achieved. But there is a hidden destructive force at play here, the law of covetousness. At its core, envy is not just about wanting what someone else has. It is a fundamental feeling of inferiority. When we see someone with more talent, more wealth, or more recognition, it acts as a mirror, reflecting our own perceived inadequacies. Instead of working to improve ourselves, we begin to resent those who have moved ahead. Think of your own life. How many times have you felt a sting of bitterness when a friend or colleague succeeded? That sting is not a sign of your ambition. It is the first symptom of a disease that can rot your character from the inside out. In this chapter, we are going to dissect the anatomy of envy. We will explore how this feeling blinds you, how it destroys your relationships, and most importantly, how it drains the energy you need to fulfill your own potential. To master human nature, you must first master your own impulses. Envy is the ultimate trap because it keeps you focused on the wrong person, someone else. Today we begin the process of breaking that habit. It is time to turn your gaze inward and reclaim the energy you have been wasting on others. Why does envy feel so personal? It is because we define ourselves through comparison. In the modern age, this has been amplified to a dangerous degree. We are no longer just comparing ourselves to our neighbors. We are comparing our lives to the curated highlight reel versions of thousands of people online. This constant exposure creates a social mirror effect. When you look at this mirror, you do not see your own progress or your own unique path. Instead, you see a distorted version of reality where everyone else is faster, richer, and happier than you. This is where the danger lies. You start to believe that your worth is tied to how you stack up against the crowd. You begin to shift your goals not based on what you truly value, but based on what will gain you the most envy-inducing status. This social mirror is a thief. It steals your focus. Every second you spend obsessing over someone else's success is a second you could have spent building your own foundation. You're essentially handing over the remote control of your life to others. They define your highs, and they define your lows. To break free, you must learn to detach. You must recognize that the mirror is a lie. The people you envy are struggling with their own demons, their own insecurities, and their own hidden failures. They are not ahead of you. They are simply on a different, often more chaotic path. When you realize that the playing field is not what it seems, the power of envy begins to fade. You stop looking at the mirror and you start looking at the road ahead. This shift in perspective is the first step toward regaining your internal authority. You are the only person you should be competing with, and the only person you should be trying to outgrow. If envy is a disease, then triggers are the symptoms that reveal where the infection is most severe. You need to identify what exactly sets you off. For some, it is material wealth, the flash of a new car, or an expensive watch. For others, it is status, the way someone commands a room, or the social media validation they receive effortlessly. These triggers are not random. They are highly specific to your own insecurities. When you feel that familiar spike of jealousy, do not suppress it. Instead, treat it like data. Ask yourself, why does this specific person's success make me feel inadequate? Often the answer is not about them at all. It is about a void in your own life that you haven't yet addressed. Perhaps you envy their creativity because you are stifled in your own work. Perhaps you envy their confidence because you are still fighting your own fear of judgment. When you identify the trigger, you stop being a victim of your emotions and start being an analyst of your own nature. Most people run away from this feeling because it is shameful. They pretend they are happy for others while secretly wishing for their failure. This is the path of the coward. The path of the master is to look directly at the feeling, understand what it is pointing to, and then use that energy as fuel. Every time you feel envy, it is actually a signal. It is your mind telling you what you truly desire, but are currently too afraid to pursue. Instead of letting that energy turn into poison that ruins your relationships, redirect it. Turn that envy into a map. What is the one thing they have that you are capable of achieving? Break down their success into actionable steps. Once you start focusing on the how, the bitterness begins to disappear, replaced by a cold, calculated hunger to improve your own reality. Now that you have identified your triggers and analyzed your envy, it is time to move from awareness to action. This is the stage where you transform. To truly master this law, you must adopt a mindset of radical appreciation. This does not mean you become passive or satisfied with mediocrity. It means you stop wasting energy on the illusions of others and start investing it entirely into your own craft. True mastery is silent. While others are busy comparing their lives and seeking validation for their small wins, you are in the shadows, perfecting your skills. The master knows that the only lasting status is competence. When you become undeniably good at what you do, envy becomes irrelevant. Why would you envy someone else's success when you are busy building a kingdom of your own? You must also learn to diversify your sources of self-worth. If your entire identity is tied to one specific goal or one specific type of achievement, you will always be vulnerable to envy. When you see someone else hit that mark, your world will shake. But if your identity is tied to the process of growth, to the relentless pursuit of excellence, then someone else's success becomes nothing more than a data point. It becomes inspiration rather than a threat. The master understands that life is not a zero-sum game. Someone else's success does not mean you have to fail. In fact, by observing the masters in your field, you can learn faster, avoid their mistakes, and accelerate your own trajectory. Shift your focus from "why do they have it?" to "how can I apply their discipline to my own work?" This is the final pivot. You stop being a spectator of other people's lives and start being the protagonist of your own. We reach the final realization. Envy is the ultimate surrender of your power. When you allow yourself to be consumed by what others have, you are effectively declaring that your own potential is insufficient. This is a lie, and it is the most expensive lie you will ever believe. The law of covetousness is not meant to hold you back. It is a test of your resolve. To overcome this, you must cultivate a sense of sovereignty. Your life, your struggles, and your achievements belong to you alone. They cannot be measured by another person's yardstick. When you truly commit to your own path, when you fall in love with the grind, the failures, and the slow climb, the noise of the world begins to fade. You stop looking over your shoulder to see who is catching up, and you stop looking ahead with resentment. The antidote to envy is obsession with your own evolution. When you are genuinely obsessed with becoming the best version of yourself, you don't have time to hate, and you don't have space for bitterness. You become immune to the social mirror because you have created your own internal standard of success. As we close this chapter, remember that the greatest revenge against envy is your own excellence. Keep your head down, keep your vision sharp, and keep building. Your journey is unique, your talent is yours to refine, and your future is waiting to be written by you. Break the cycle, reclaim your energy, and step into the person you were meant to be. The trap is broken, now move forward. Chapter 6. The Law of Short-Sightedness. Human beings are naturally wired to focus on the immediate. This was a survival mechanism in our primitive past. If you saw a fruit, you ate it because you didn't know when the next meal would come. But in the modern world, this tendency to live only in the present moment is a dangerous trap. It blinds us to the long-term consequences of our actions and keeps us reacting to the world rather than shaping it. We live in a culture of instant gratification. We want results now. We want recognition now. We want to solve problems with quick fixes. This short-sightedness is the primary reason why so many people fail to achieve their goals. They focus on the short-term high, the quick win, the immediate anger, the cheap thrill, at the expense of their long-term health, reputation, and success. When you are short-sighted, your vision is limited to the tip of your nose. You fail to see the invisible threads connecting your current actions to future outcomes. You react to a small insult with explosive rage, not realizing you have just destroyed a professional relationship that could have benefited you for years. You choose the path of least resistance today, only to find yourself facing a mountain of obstacles tomorrow. The master of human nature resists this primal urge. They understand that power is built over time through patience and strategic thinking. To overcome short-sightedness, you must train your mind to look beyond the immediate horizon. Understanding that the immediate is a trap is only the first step. To truly master the law of short-sightedness, you must develop strategic vision. This is the ability to see the board from above, observing not just your current move, but the 10 moves that follow. Most people are like players in a game of checkers, reacting to the piece immediately in front of them. The master is playing chess. They understand that every action, whether it's a professional decision, a personal interaction, or a negotiation, has a ripple effect. To cultivate this vision, follow these strategic pillars. Reversal of perspectives. When you are caught in a conflict, step out of your own emotional frame. View the situation through the eyes of the other person, and then through the eyes of an impartial observer. This distance instantly kills your short-sighted reaction and allows you to see the bigger, structural issues at play. The endgame visualization. Before you commit to a major action, project yourself into the future. If you achieve exactly what you want today, what are the unintended consequences 6 months from now? Often, we find that the victory we crave today creates a disaster for tomorrow. patience as a weapon. The greatest weakness of the short-sighted is their inability to wait. They will rush into a deal or a relationship because they fear missing out. Use their impatience against them. By being the one person in the room willing to wait, you gain leverage. You force them to reveal their desperation while you maintain your composure. Remember, time is your greatest asset if you learn to control how you view it. While others are exhausted from constantly reacting to the now, you will be building the future. This is not just about being smart. It is about outlasting the competition. Stop reacting to the fire in front of you and start building the fortress that will last for years. We have identified the trap of immediate pleasure and the need for strategic vision. Now, the final step is to become a true master of time. Most people are slaves to the present. Their moods, their environment, and the people around them dictate their pace. If they are stressed, they panic. If they are bored, they act recklessly. To break this cycle and achieve lasting influence, you must master these three final disciplines. Detach from the emotional loop. Your emotions are the primary fuel for short-sightedness. When you feel a surge of anger or an obsessive need for validation, recognize it as a short-term signal. Acknowledge the feeling, but do not let it command your actions. Breathe, pause, and wait for the emotional tide to recede before you make a move. Focus on the grand strategy. Every successful person in history had a long-term project, a life's work that acted as an anchor. When you are distracted by daily drama, return to your anchor. Ask yourself, does this current action move me closer to my ultimate vision, or does it set me back? If it doesn't serve your long-term goal, it is a distraction that must be cut. Learn to tolerate ambiguity. The short-sighted crave certainty because they want comfort now. But the future is inherently ambiguous. By learning to be comfortable with not knowing exactly how things will play out, you gain the patience to let opportunities mature. You don't force a bloom, you cultivate the garden. The world belongs to those who can see past the noise of today. While everyone else is racing to the finish line of a minor race, you are building a legacy that will outlast them all. You are no longer reacting to the world, you are orchestrating it. Chapter 7. The Law of Defensiveness. We often assume that if we are logical, persuasive, and honest, people will naturally agree with us. We believe that presenting the truth is enough to change a mind. But human nature is far more complex and, frankly, more resistant than that. Every person carries an internal armor, a set of defensive walls built up over years of experience, pain, and conditioning. When you try to influence them, you are not just speaking to their mind, you are knocking on that armor. The biggest mistake most people make is to try and push through this resistance. They argue harder, they use more facts, or they pressure the other person to see reason. This only triggers a more intense defensive reaction. The more you push, the more the other person retreats into their shell. They don't hear your words, they hear an attack on their autonomy and their identity. To master the law of defensive behavior, you must first stop being a pusher. Instead, become a master of the approach. You must learn to lower the defenses of others before you even attempt to plant an idea in their minds. Think of it like trying to enter a fortress. If you throw yourself against the gate, you will be repelled. But if you find the hidden entrance, if you speak to their insecurities, their secret desires, or their need for validation, the gate opens for you voluntarily. This is the core of influence. It is never about forcing your will upon others. It is about creating the conditions where they feel comfortable enough to lower their guard. Once that armor is down, they are no longer listening to defend themselves. They are listening to understand you. This transition from defender to listener is the first step toward true power, and it is the foundation upon which all successful social and professional interactions are built. Once you understand that people are naturally resistant, the next step is to master the most powerful tool for lowering that resistance: validation. Think about the last time you felt truly understood. When someone actually listened to your perspective without immediately jumping in to correct you, didn't you feel your guard drop? That is the power of validation. Most people enter a conversation with their own agenda. They are waiting for their turn to speak, planning their next counter-argument, or looking for flaws in what the other person is saying. This is precisely why the other person stays defensive. When you make the conversation about your own ego or your own ideas, you are confirming their suspicion that you are a threat to their autonomy. To shift this, you must adopt the strategic listener mindset. You need to focus entirely on the other person's world. Ask yourself, what are they afraid of? What do they value? When they speak, resist the urge to debate. Instead, validate their experience. Use phrases like, "I can see why you would feel that way," or "that makes complete sense given your background." You are not necessarily agreeing with their facts or their logic. You are validating their reality. By doing this, you are telling their defensive armor, "I am not here to attack you. I am here to understand you." When a person feels heard and validated, they experience a chemical release of relief. They stop looking for traps in your words and start looking for connection. This creates a state of psychological safety. Once they feel safe, their need to defend their position disappears. They stop being rigid and become fluid. This is not manipulation. It is social intelligence. By validating them, you are effectively disarming them. You are transforming a potential adversary into an ally who is now open to your influence. In the previous parts, we explored how to stop pushing against resistance and how to use validation to disarm others. Now we must address the most challenging aspect of this law, dealing with the rigid mind. Some people have built their defensive walls so thick that simple validation isn't enough to reach them. These individuals are often defined by their inflexibility. They cling to their opinions as if they are life-saving anchors, and any attempt to suggest a different perspective feels like a personal betrayal to them. When dealing with such a person, you must avoid the direct approach at all costs. If you point out the flaws in their reasoning, you only make them double down on their errors. Their rigidity is not based on facts, it is based on fear. They are afraid that if they admit they might be wrong, they will lose their standing or their sense of self. To influence a rigid mind, you must use the indirect strategy. Instead of presenting your own ideas, lead them to discover those ideas as if they were their own. Ask questions that prompt them to think through the problem themselves. By guiding them through a process of self-discovery, you allow them to arrive at your conclusion without feeling pressured. You are simply the architect of the path they are walking on. Furthermore, you must be patient. You cannot force someone to change their mind in a single conversation. If you notice they are becoming defensive or tense, pull back immediately. Give them space. The goal is not to win the argument today. The goal is to keep the channel of communication open. By remaining calm and non-threatening, you show them that you are not there to conquer them. Over time, this consistency will soften their rigidity. They will eventually learn that you are a safe person to interact with, and that trust is the key that finally opens the vault. Sometimes, the most effective way to lead someone is by not appearing to lead at all. When you are too transparent with your agenda, people instinctively pull away because they perceive your influence as an attempt to control them. To overcome this, you must master the art of indirect influence. This involves framing your ideas not as commands or direct suggestions, but as observations that align perfectly with the other person's existing interests and goals. Instead of saying, "You should do this," you must learn to ask questions that lead them to the conclusion you desire. By aligning your objectives with their underlying motivations, you effectively lower the barrier of suspicion. When you remove the pressure to conform, the other person feels a sense of autonomy and control, which makes them far more likely to embrace your influence without even realizing they are being led. This is the difference between a manipulator who is easily spotted and a strategist who remains invisible. You must also learn to utilize the power of suggestion. When you plant a seed of an idea, give the other person the space to grow it themselves. If they feel that the thought originated in their own mind, they will protect it with the same conviction as if it were their own original discovery. This is the highest form of influence. You guide them toward your desired outcome, but you allow them to keep the credit. By prioritizing their need for ego preservation over your own desire to be right, you create a cooperative environment where defenses naturally dissolve. Remember, people will rarely fight against a conclusion they believe they reached on their own. We have explored the anatomy of resistance, the art of validation, the softening of rigid minds, and the subtle power of indirect influence. Now we must synthesize these lessons into a final cohesive strategy, mastering the defensive landscape of every interaction. Understanding the law of defensive behavior is not about becoming a chameleon who changes their personality for everyone. It is about becoming a high-level strategist who understands that power is negotiated through the management of emotions. To truly master this, you must develop a heightened sense of self-awareness. When you enter a high-stakes conversation, monitor your own internal defenses. Are you feeling frustrated because the other person is not agreeing with you? That is your own defensive armor hardening. If you cannot control your own reactivity, you have already lost the influence battle. The master of human nature remains calm, detached, and observant. They view the other person's resistance not as a personal failure, but as a fascinating data point in the landscape of human psychology. Your goal is to become the calm center of every storm. By staying patient, validating the perspectives of others, and guiding them through indirect influence, you create a social environment where you are the most trusted and influential person in the room. You stop wasting your energy trying to break down walls and start spending your time building bridges. When you master this law, you gain the ability to navigate through the most stubborn conflicts with grace, ensuring that your long-term influence remains secure. This is how you move from being a reactive participant to a master of your social environment, leaving the impulsive, defensive behavior to those who have not yet learned the game. Chapter 8, The Law of Self-Sabotage. We often look at the world around us and believe that our obstacles are external. We blame our circumstances, our colleagues, the economy, or bad luck for our lack of progress. But the most dangerous enemy you will ever face is not a competitor or a critic. It is the shadow within yourself. Most of us go through life completely unaware of how we are actively sabotaging our own success. We create patterns of behavior that keep us stuck, and then we wonder why we aren't moving forward. The law of self-sabotage is based on a fundamental truth. Our internal reality dictates our external results. If your mind is cluttered with self-doubt, hidden insecurities, and past traumas, these internal states will inevitably leak into your actions. You might think you are working toward a goal, but subconsciously, you are setting yourself up for failure because you are afraid of the responsibility that comes with success. You avoid taking risks, you procrastinate on critical tasks, or you choose the wrong people to work with, all to maintain the status quo that you are secretly comfortable with. To master this law, you must first develop radical self-awareness. You need to become an objective observer of your own life. When things go wrong, the immediate human reaction is to look for a scapegoat. The strategic mind, however, looks inward. You must start asking uncomfortable questions. Am I failing because of bad luck or because I am subconsciously afraid of the outcome? Is my behavior consistent with the person I claim to be, or am I playing a role that keeps me small? This chapter is about unmasking those hidden parts of yourself that hold you back. It is about realizing that while you cannot control everything that happens to you, you have absolute control over how you sabotage yourself. By identifying these patterns and bringing them into the light, you reclaim your power. You stop being a victim of your own habits and start becoming the architect of your own victory. Once you begin to recognize that you are the architect of your own obstacles, you encounter the next challenge, inertia. Our brains are hardwired for comfort. We develop habitual ways of thinking and acting because they are predictable, even when those habits are clearly destructive. This cycle of stagnation is what we call inertia of the self. You may consciously want a change, a new career, better relationships, or increased productivity. But your subconscious mind is fighting to keep you exactly where you are because the known is safer than the unknown. The key to breaking this pattern is to understand the cost of your current comfort. Often we stay stuck because the pain of our current situation hasn't yet exceeded the pain of change. To overcome this, you must vividly visualize the long-term consequences of staying the same. If you do not change, where will you be in 5 years? Will your regrets be worse than the temporary discomfort of discipline and growth? Bringing this future reality into your present consciousness creates the necessary positive friction to force you out of your stagnant state. You must also learn to replace large daunting goals with micro-victories. Self-sabotage thrives on overwhelm. When you look at a massive objective, your inner critic whispers that you aren't capable, leading you to procrastinate as a defense mechanism. By breaking your path down into tiny, actionable steps, you strip away the power of that internal resistance. You don't need to conquer the mountain today. You just need to take one step. As you start racking up these small wins, your self-perception begins to shift. You stop viewing yourself as someone who tries and fails and start seeing yourself as someone who consistently executes. This shift is vital. You are essentially rewiring your brain's feedback loop. Every time you follow through on a small task, despite your internal desire to slack off, you are building the muscle of self-mastery. This is how you silence the shadow, not by fighting it directly, but by rendering it irrelevant through consistent, disciplined action. One of the most persistent ways we sabotage ourselves is by clinging to a fixed identity. We often tell ourselves stories like, "I am not a disciplined person," "I am bad with money," or "I am naturally socially awkward." We treat these labels as if they were permanent personality traits etched into our DNA. In reality, these are nothing more than narratives we have adopted to excuse our lack of growth. By boxing yourself into a narrow definition of who you are, you effectively kill your potential to become someone better. The law of self-sabotage teaches us that identity is not a static state, it is a fluid process. If you define yourself by your past failures, you will continue to recreate those failures in your future. To break free, you must practice identity decoupling. This means separating your current actions from your past history. Just because you have struggled with procrastination or insecurity for years does not mean that is who you are. Those are merely behavioral patterns, and patterns can be unlearned. When you feel the urge to retreat into your old, self-sabotaging identity, pause and ask, is this behavior serving the person I am becoming, or the person I was yesterday? You are not a prisoner of your history. By consciously choosing new behaviors, even when they feel unnatural at first, you begin to build a new identity. With repetition, these new actions become your default setting. You are creating a new self-narrative based on your future aspirations, not your previous limitations. Once you realize that you are the author of your own identity, the shadow of self-sabotage loses its power. You are no longer bound by who you were, but liberated by who you are choosing to be today. We all have an inner voice, a persistent critic that monitors our every move. For many, this voice is not a motivator. It is a primary agent of sabotage. It highlights our flaws, magnifies our past failures, and whispers that we are not enough. This inner critic is essentially a survival mechanism gone wrong. It is designed to keep you safe by discouraging you from taking any risks that might lead to embarrassment or rejection. To master the law of self-sabotage, you must learn to govern this critic rather than letting it govern you. The secret is to move from judgment to observation. When the voice says, "You are going to fail at this," do not fight it and do not accept it as truth. Simply label it, acknowledge it by saying, "My inner critic is currently trying to keep me in my comfort zone. By labeling the thought, you create a psychological distance between your identity and the criticism. You are no longer the thought, you are the observer of the thought. Once you have established this distance, replace the criticism with cold, objective data. If your inner voice says, "You aren't capable of this," look at your actual evidence. What have you accomplished? What skills have you developed? By grounding yourself in your real-world progress, you deflate the critic's power. You are teaching your brain to prioritize objective reality over irrational fear. When you consistently replace subjective self-doubt with objective evaluation, the critic loses its ability to paralyze you. You regain control of your decision-making process, allowing you to act with clarity and purpose regardless of what that internal voice is saying. To conclude, mastering the law of self-sabotage requires more than occasional effort. It demands a total commitment to self-mastery. You have learned to identify your internal shadow, break the cycle of inertia, decouple from your limiting past identity, and silence the inner critic. Now, you must sustain this new reality. Sustainability comes from systems, not willpower alone. You must build daily structures that make your growth inevitable. Design your environment to minimize friction and maximize focus. Whether it is a rigorous morning routine or specific accountability measures, your external systems must act as a scaffolding for your internal change. When willpower fades, as it inevitably will, your systems will carry you forward. Furthermore, you must embrace the reality that this is a lifelong process. There is no final destination where the shadow disappears forever. The shadow is a part of the human experience, and it will always attempt to resurface. The goal is not to eliminate it, but to stay vigilant and maintain command over your reactions. By consistently choosing the path of discipline and self-awareness, you transform your life from a series of accidental failures into a masterpiece of intentional design. You are the final authority over your potential. Own that power, stay focused on your vision, and keep executing with relentless precision. This is your journey toward true mastery. Chapter 9: The Law of Repression. Every individual walks through life carrying a carefully constructed mask. We curate our public image, choosing which parts of our personality to display and which to hide. This process of suppression, what we often call repressing our true thoughts, desires, and impulses, is a necessary tool for social survival. We do not express every fleeting thought, nor do we act on every primitive urge. However, there is a profound difference between social modulation and the unhealthy law of repression. When you push your authentic self into the shadows to appease others or to fit into a rigid societal mold, you pay a steep psychological price. The problem with constant repression is that it is fundamentally exhausting. Your mind requires an immense amount of energy to keep your authentic self under wraps. This creates an internal division, the person you present to the world and the person you actually are. Over time, this split becomes a source of chronic anxiety and detachment. You may find yourself feeling like an actor in your own life, moving through interactions without any genuine connection because you are too busy monitoring your own behavior to ensure that you are behaving correctly. To master the law of repression, you must first acknowledge that your suppressed emotions and desires do not simply disappear when you hide them. They remain in the subconscious, exerting pressure from within. This pressure eventually leaks out in distorted ways, as sudden outbursts, passive-aggressive behavior, or a pervasive sense of bitterness. The goal is not to abandon all social filters, but to achieve a state of integrated transparency. You must learn how to integrate your deeper personality traits into your daily life so that you are not constantly performing. By understanding how to express your true self in a strategic and controlled manner, you stop wasting energy on the mask and start directing that power toward your own growth. This is the first step toward reclaiming your psychological freedom. When you force your genuine feelings, ambitions, or personality quirks into the dark, you are not destroying them, You are simply storing them under immense psychological pressure. Think of these repressed elements like a pressurized steam pipe. If you keep tightening the valve without allowing for any release, eventually the system will experience a structural failure. In the human context, this failure manifests as sudden, uncontrollable outbursts or patterns of self-sabotage that seem completely out of character. Most people try to solve this by holding it in even tighter, believing that willpower is the solution to their internal volatility. They think that by suppressing their frustration or their darker impulses even more, they are being stronger or more professional. In reality, they are merely increasing the intensity of the inevitable explosion. This is why you often see individuals who appear calm and perfectly composed for months, only to suffer a complete emotional breakdown or make a catastrophic error in judgment over something minor. That event is not the cause of their collapse. It is the final straw on a pressure-heavy foundation. To master this law, you must stop viewing your suppressed traits as enemies to be conquered. Instead, view them as energy sources that need to be channeled. You need to create structured outlets for the parts of yourself that don't fit into your daily social mask. Whether it is through creative projects, physical exertion, or honest conversations with trusted confidants, you must find a way to express your reality in a controlled environment. By releasing this pressure in small calculated doses, you prevent the buildup that leads to internal combustion. When you provide a healthy outlet for your suppressed self, you no longer feel the need to constantly monitor your behavior, which grants you a level of authenticity and presence that others will find both powerful and magnetic. Because the subconscious cannot keep secrets forever, repressed energy will always find a way to leak out. This is the stage where repression stops being a private internal struggle and starts impacting your external reputation. Have you ever noticed someone who seems overly stiff or anxious in social settings? Their body language, tone of voice, and micro-expressions often reveal the tension they are trying to hide. This is leakage, the subconscious breaking through the mask. To master your influence, you must become a student of these leaks, both in yourself and in others. In yourself, leakage often manifests as passive-aggressive comments, unintentional sarcasm, or physical restlessness during tense moments. These are signs that your repressed self is fighting for air. Instead of ignoring these moments, use them as data. When you feel that surge of tension, stop and ask yourself, what part of my true opinion or emotion am I trying to suppress right now? By identifying the suppressed content, you can choose to express it with tactical honesty instead of letting it leak out in a distorted, destructive way. For others, spotting these leaks gives you a massive strategic advantage. When you see someone's composure crack, even for a split second, you have found their pressure point. They are fighting a war against their own impulses, and that internal conflict is consuming their focus. By observing these patterns, you can navigate your interactions with superior emotional intelligence. You learn to read the room not just by what is being said, but by what is being held back. Mastering the art of observation allows you to stay calm while others are struggling with their own hidden pressures. To master the law of repression, you must learn the art of tactical release. This is not about unfiltered honesty, which is often reckless. It is about calculated expression. Most people fail because they wait until they are emotionally overwhelmed to speak their minds. This results in emotional explosions that damage their credibility and social standing. A strategist, however, understands that the best time to express a suppressed opinion or desire is when the stakes are controlled and the audience is receptive. By releasing pressure in small, measured doses, you maintain your calm and keep your reputation intact. You must also learn to use your suppressed traits as a form of hidden leverage. When you stop trying to project a perfect, sterile image, you become more relatable and human. People are naturally drawn to those who seem authentic and comfortable in their own skin. By choosing when to reveal your true thoughts or even your vulnerabilities, you create a sense of trust that those hiding behind rigid masks can never achieve. This is the ultimate power move. You are no longer a slave to your social performance. You control the narrative of who you are, and you dictate how much of your inner reality the world gets to see. This balance is what separates a mere social participant from a true master of influence. You are now the architect of your own persona, using tactical release to stay sane while others continue to drown under the weight of their own repressed, fragile, and ultimately unsustainable masks. We have explored the burden of the mask, the danger of pressure, the telltale signs of leakage, and the necessity of tactical release. Now we reach the final stage, the integration of the shadow self. True influence is not found by polishing a perfect persona, but by owning the totality of your character. To fully master the law of repression, you must stop viewing your suppressed traits as flaws that require hiding. Instead, integrate them. This means accepting your darker impulses, your raw ambitions, and your unconventional thoughts as legitimate parts of your identity. When you stop fighting your own nature, you remove the internal friction that drains your mental energy. You gain a level of grounded confidence that cannot be mimicked. People perceive this as genuine presence. When you are integrated, you are no longer defensive because you have nothing to hide. You move through the world with a sense of ease that makes others feel comfortable and disarmed. This is the ultimate peak of social mastery. You have reclaimed your psychological power from the pressures of societal expectations. You are no longer living a performance, you are living an authentic reality. By maintaining this integration, you ensure your long-term mental health and sustain your influence effortlessly. The mask is gone, and in its place stands a person of absolute conviction. You are finally and truly free. Chapter 10: The Law of Envy. Envy is the most silent and destructive emotion in the human social landscape. Unlike anger or frustration, which are often expressed openly, envy is almost always kept hidden behind a mask of politeness. We are conditioned to believe that envy is a shameful emotion, so we bury it deep, which only allows it to fester like a poison. It changes how you perceive others, how you process your own success, and most dangerously, how you interact with your peers. To master the social environment, you must learn to recognize this emotion in others and, more importantly, identify it within yourself. The reality of human nature is that we are constantly comparing ourselves to those around us. It is a primitive instinct born from the need to understand our standing in the group. However, in our modern world, this tendency for comparison has gone into overdrive. When you see someone you know achieve a goal you have been struggling with, your brain rarely responds with pure, unadulterated joy. Instead, it triggers a subtle sting of dissatisfaction. You start to find flaws in their success, you question their methods, or you distance yourself from them. This is the first stage of envy. If you don't catch this early, it can lead to toxic behavior. You might find yourself subtly undermining those you envy, or perhaps you become paralyzed by the belief that their gain is your loss. This mindset is the ultimate form of self-sabotage. It blinds you to the opportunities that exist in your own life and turns potential allies into imagined enemies. Envy forces you to look outward at what others have, while your true power always lies in what you can build for yourself. To master this, you must shift your perspective. Stop viewing other people's achievements as a measure of your failure, and start viewing them as evidence of what is possible. Recognition is the antidote to the poison. Once you recognize that envy is an ever-present low-level virus, you must understand how it functions through the mechanism of comparison. We do not envy people who are vastly different from us. We envy those who are similar. We compare ourselves to those in our immediate social circle, our colleagues, or our peers. When someone in your weight class succeeds, the proximity of that success makes it personal. It challenges your sense of worth and forces you to confront the gap between where you are and where you desire to be. The danger lies in how this comparison distorts your perception of reality. When envy takes root, you stop seeing your peers as individuals and start seeing them as benchmarks for your own perceived inadequacy. You lose the ability to appreciate their talents because you are too focused on the threat they pose to your status. This is not merely a social inconvenience, it is a strategic error. By focusing on what someone else has achieved, you drain the mental bandwidth you should be using to innovate, refine your skills, and execute your own projects. Furthermore, this internal friction often leads to the fallacy of the zero-sum game. You begin to subconsciously believe that for someone else to win, you must lose. This is a false narrative. In reality, the success of others provides a roadmap, not a roadblock. It serves as proof of possibility. When you catch yourself experiencing that familiar sting of dissatisfaction, you are at a crossroads. You can either allow that emotion to narrow your focus into a spiral of resentment, or you can use it as a diagnostic tool. Ask yourself, what specifically about their success bothers me? Is it their platform, their financial gain, their public recognition? Usually, the answer reveals a specific goal you have been neglecting or a fear you have been unwilling to face. By deconstructing the object of your envy, you strip the emotion of its power. You transform a reactive, destructive impulse into an active, strategic plan. You stop being a spectator of their life and become the architect of your own. As envy transitions from an internal sting to a behavioral pattern, it often manifests as covert hostility. Since society deems envy a social taboo, the feeling is rarely expressed as direct competition. Instead, it leaks out through backhanded compliments, subtle sabotage, or the deliberate withholding of support. When you observe this in others, it is a clear signal that you have triggered their insecurities. Conversely, when you find yourself engaging in these behaviors, it is an urgent indicator that your professional discipline is slipping. Covert hostility is a high-cost endeavor. It requires you to invest energy into monitoring, belittling, or undermining someone else's progress, rather than investing that energy into your own domain. This is a losing strategy because it keeps you tethered to the other person. You become reactive to their milestones rather than proactive in your own development. The moment you begin to prioritize someone else's downfall over your own ascent, you have ceded your power. You are effectively making their life the center of your focus, which is the ultimate surrender of control. To master this, you must adopt a filter of detachment. When you feel the urge to criticize, dismiss, or subtly undermine a peer's success, stop and analyze the impulse. Is this criticism rooted in objective, factual observation, or is it a defensive reaction to your own feelings of inadequacy? By naming the hostility for what it is, a byproduct of your own unaddressed goals, you can neutralize it. True mastery lies in the ability to acknowledge another person's success, analyze the components of that success, and then pivot back to your own strategic objectives. Do not let the virus of hostility distract you from the work that actually defines your trajectory. You have identified the virus of comparison and recognized the decay of covert hostility. Now, you must learn the most critical skill in social mastery, the transmutation of envy. This is the process of converting a destructive, reactive impulse into a productive, active engine for your own growth. Instead of letting envy paralyze you or lead you toward petty sabotage, use it as a diagnostic tool. Your envy is actually a high-fidelity map of your deepest, most unfulfilled desires. It points exactly to the territory you want to occupy but have not yet conquered. When you feel that familiar sting of dissatisfaction looking at a peer's achievement, stop immediately. Do not suppress it and do not act on it. Instead, deconstruct it. Ask yourself, what specific skill, position, or recognition do they have that I am currently lacking? Once you isolate the target, stop viewing the person as a rival and start viewing them as a data point. What are they doing that you are not? What methods, habits, or strategies have they implemented that you have ignored? By shifting your mindset, you reclaim your agency. You are no longer a victim of your emotions, you are a student of success. This shift is profound. It turns the exhausting energy of resentment into the clean, sustainable energy of ambition. You are no longer chasing someone else's shadow. You are using the light they emit to see your own path more clearly. This is how you master your environment and maintain your focus. We have traveled from the initial sting of comparison to the strategic transmutation of envy into fuel. Now we reach the final stage, achieving absolute immunity. This is not about becoming emotionless, it is about becoming unshakable. The envious person is constantly reacting to the world, their mood and energy fluctuating based on the successes of others. You, however, will operate from a position of internal stability. Immunity is built by fully committing to your own unique trajectory. When you are profoundly clear on your mission, the successes of others become irrelevant to your self-worth. You no longer need to compare because you are competing against your own potential, not an external benchmark. This level of focus is rare and powerful. It frees you from the cycle of resentment and allows you to build with relentless, quiet intensity. You must reach a point where you celebrate the success of others, not out of forced kindness, but because you possess the supreme confidence that their wins do not diminish your own. Your vision is too vast to be derailed by someone else's progress. By mastering this law, you stop being a passenger in the social game and become a master of your own destiny. You have successfully neutralized the virus, turned your weaknesses into weapons, and hardened your mind against the corrosive effects of envy. You are now prepared to navigate any environment with poise, clarity, and absolute unwavering strength. The path ahead is clear. Go and execute. Chapter 11. The Law of Grandiosity. Grandiosity is a seductive psychological state. It is the moment when an individual's self-perception detaches from reality, leading them to believe they are capable of achieving far more than their current resources, skills, or experience allow. In its early stages, grandiosity can feel like unshakable confidence or visionary thinking. It gives you the drive to dream big and aim for the impossible. However, the law of grandiosity dictates that there is a precise threshold where this confidence transforms from an asset into your greatest liability. When you lose touch with the reality of your limitations, you stop planning and start gambling. The core danger of grandiosity is that it blinds you to the feedback loop of the world. Because you are convinced of your own inherent superiority, you stop listening to criticism, ignore data that contradicts your plan, and undervalue the importance of execution. You start to believe that your vision alone is enough to change the world, neglecting the grind, the preparation, and the incremental steps required to build anything sustainable. This is where most creators, entrepreneurs, and leaders fail. They fall in love with the fantasy of the destination and completely ignore the harsh terrain of the journey. To master this law, you must recognize that your vision is only as powerful as your ability to execute it. Grandiosity thrives on speed, shortcuts, and the belief that you are an exception to the rules of discipline. The reality is that the higher you aim, the more grounded you must be. You need a vision that is grand, yes, but your strategy must be microscopic. In this chapter, we will strip away the illusions of ego and teach you how to maintain the fire of ambition without burning your own house down. The goal is not to stop dreaming, but to build a bridge between your massive ambitions and the reality of your daily output. When you fall prey to the law of grandiosity, your relationship with time becomes distorted. You begin to believe that you are exempt from the standard duration required to master a skill or build a brand. This mindset breeds an insatiable need for shortcuts. Because you see yourself as a visionary, you view the process of incremental growth as an insult to your intelligence. You want the rewards of the journey without enduring the friction of the climb. This is the precise moment where your professional downfall begins. Grandiosity manifests as impatience. You chase trends, seek viral hacks, and pivot your strategy whenever the initial spark of motivation fades. You prioritize the aesthetic of success, the branding, the talk, the appearance of being busy, over the actual mechanics of production. You are essentially building a skyscraper on a foundation of sand. In the professional world, this is easily spotted. It is the creator who releases low-quality content to chase numbers, the entrepreneur who neglects customer feedback, and the leader who micromanages because they refuse to trust the process. To master this, you must confront your impatience. Grandiosity loves the fast track, but mastery is found in the slow grind. Ask yourself, are you working or are you just performing? The grandiose mind loves the feeling of being busy, but it hates the drudgery of true discipline. You must learn to fall in love with the unglamorous tasks, the daily edits, the repetitive practice, the silent hours where no one is watching. These are not obstacles to your greatness, they are the materials from which it is built. When you stop rushing toward the finish line and start respecting the step you are on, you dismantle the trap of grandiosity. You stop being a spectator of your own success and start becoming the architect of your own reality. The most dangerous aspect of grandiosity is its impact on your judgment. When your ego becomes the primary driver of your decisions, you lose the ability to see the world as it is, opting instead to see it as you wish it to be. You begin to interpret feedback as personal attacks and market data as inaccurate. This is a fatal mistake. In any competitive landscape, your survival depends on your capacity for objective self-assessment. When you're under the spell of grandiosity, you become emotionally invested in your own narrative, which makes you blind to the very risks that can destroy your progress. You start ignoring the small, critical details because they seem beneath your vision. You stop questioning your own assumptions because you assume your intuition is infallible. This is how empires crumble from within. The reality is that the market does not care about your self-image or the scale of your ambitions. It cares only about the value you deliver and the consistency of your output. To protect your vision, you must divorce your ego from your results. You need to create a feedback loop where you actively seek out the flaws in your plan before the world exposes them for you. This requires a level of humility that the grandiose mind finds painful. However, it is the only way to ensure your growth remains tethered to reality. True strength is not found in the size of your dream, but in the structural integrity of your approach. When you stop protecting your ego, you start protecting your future. To overcome the pitfalls of grandiosity, you must master the strategy of grounded expansion. This means decoupling your long-term vision from your short-term expectations. It is entirely possible to aim for massive success while remaining hyper-focused on the granular details of your daily execution. In fact, this is the only way to scale sustainably. Instead of trying to manifest the end result overnight, focus on building a robust system that can withstand the pressure of growth. Grounded expansion requires you to treat every project as a scientific experiment. You hypothesize, you test, and, most importantly, you pivot based on the hard data you receive, not on your personal desires. This mindset shifts your perspective from needing to be right to wanting to be effective. When you stop obsessing over the grand aspect of your vision and start obsessing over the quality of your current output, you cultivate a quiet, lethal effectiveness. Your confidence stops being a fragile, ego-driven shield and becomes a byproduct of your actual competence. You are no longer shouting about your potential. You are demonstrating it through consistent, high-level performance. This shift allows you to expand your influence without losing your grip on reality. You remain the most dangerous person in the room because your ambition is fueled by discipline, not by delusion. You are building something that will last, and that is the true hallmark of a master. The foundation is set. It is time to move toward the final synthesis. We have journeyed through the traps of shortcut seeking, the fragility of ego-driven visions, and the power of grounded expansion. We conclude here at the state of equilibrium. The master of this law is one who possesses the courage to hold a massive vision while maintaining the humility to execute on the smallest details. You have learned that grandiosity is not inherently evil. It is merely a dangerous energy that must be harnessed, not unleashed. By balancing your expansive dreams with a relentless commitment to objective reality, you achieve a state of permanent professional grace. You no longer need to broadcast your greatness to the world because your results speak with an authority that ego cannot replicate. This is your new baseline. You are no longer prone to the volatile swings of impatience or the blinding fog of self-importance. You have replaced the desperate need for external validation with the quiet internal satisfaction of masterful work. Your influence is now built on the bedrock of proven competence rather than the shifting sands of fantasy. As you move forward, carry this lesson with you. The ultimate power is not in the size of the pedestal you build for yourself, but in the strength of the foundation you construct for your legacy. You are prepared, you are grounded, and you are ready to command your domain. The illusion is shattered, and in its place stands a reality you have forged with your own hands. You are the architect of your own true, enduring, and undeniable success. Chapter 12: The Law of Gender Rigidity. Every society, whether ancient or modern, creates invisible rules about how men and women are supposed to think, behave, and express themselves. These rules are rarely written down, yet they shape millions of lives with astonishing power. Long before you were old enough to question them, they had already begun shaping your identity. As a child, you naturally explored every part of your personality, but little by little, you learned that certain behaviors earned approval while others invited criticism. You adapted without realizing it. You weren't simply learning how to survive, you were learning how to perform. If you were praised for appearing fearless, you became less willing to show vulnerability. If you were rewarded for always being agreeable, you learned to silence opinions that might create conflict. With every reward and every correction, the performance became more convincing. Eventually, the role felt so familiar that it no longer seemed like a role at all. It felt like you. This is where the illusion becomes dangerous. What you call your personality is often a mixture of your genuine nature and the expectations you absorbed from the world around you. The two become so tightly woven together that separating them feels almost impossible. Yet the question remains, who would you become if those expectations had never existed? Most people never dare to ask that question, and because they never ask it, they spend their lives protecting an identity they never consciously chose. The moment that question enters your mind, something hidden begins to awaken. And once it does, you can no longer ignore the silent conflict between who you truly are and who you have been taught to become. That conflict exists because no part of your mind simply disappears. Every emotion you suppress, every quality you reject, and every impulse you hide remains alive beneath the surface. It waits patiently, influencing your decisions without ever asking for permission. A man who has learned to fear vulnerability may convince himself that emotional distance is strength. He becomes skilled at solving problems but struggles to build genuine intimacy. Behind his confidence often lives an unspoken fear of being truly seen. A woman who has been conditioned to seek constant approval may become an expert at caring for everyone except herself. She avoids disagreement, ignores her own needs, and mistakes self-sacrifice for love. From the outside, she appears generous. On the inside, she slowly loses touch with her own voice. Neither person is weak. Both are responding to patterns they learned long ago. The mind always protects the identity it believes will earn acceptance, but the qualities it rejects do not vanish. They move into what psychologists often call the shadow, the hidden side of the personality that quietly shapes your reactions, relationships, and ambitions. This is why people sometimes behave in ways that even surprise themselves. A lifetime of restraint can suddenly become anger. Years of silence can become resentment. The mask begins to crack, revealing the parts that have been waiting to be acknowledged all along. And to understand why those hidden qualities possess such remarkable power, you must first recognize a deeper truth about human nature itself. Human nature is not built on rigid opposites, it is built on balance. Every person carries the capacity for strength and tenderness, logic and intuition, confidence and compassion. These qualities are not owned by one gender or the other. They are part of the complete human experience. The problem begins when society encourages you to develop only the traits that fit your assigned role while ignoring the rest. Over time, the neglected side of your personality becomes unfamiliar. Instead of seeing it as a source of growth, you begin to fear it. But what you resist often contains your greatest potential. A leader who cannot empathize eventually loses the trust of others. A deeply compassionate person who cannot set boundaries becomes easy to manipulate. In both cases, the missing quality creates an imbalance that quietly limits their lives. The most influential people in history were rarely trapped inside a single identity. They knew when to be firm and when to be gentle, when to trust reason and when to listen to instinct. Their strength came from flexibility, not rigidity. Nature itself follows this principle. The strongest trees bend with the wind instead of resisting it. The healthiest minds adapt instead of clinging to fixed roles. Real maturity is not about becoming more masculine or more feminine. It is about becoming more complete. The moment you stop rejecting parts of yourself, you stop fighting your own nature. And once that inner battle begins to fade, another challenge immediately appears, one that keeps millions of people trapped even after they recognize the truth. And once that inner battle begins to fade, another challenge immediately appears, one that keeps millions of people trapped even after they recognize the truth. That challenge is fear. Not the fear of discovering who you are, but the fear of how others will respond when you begin to change. The people around you have grown comfortable with the version of you they have always known. The moment you step outside that familiar role, some will question you, others may criticize you. A few may even try to pull you back into the identity that makes them feel secure. This is why so many people continue living behind a mask. The mask offers approval, but it slowly steals authenticity. You gain acceptance from the world while losing connection with yourself. The cost is rarely visible at first. It appears in subtle ways. A career chosen to satisfy expectations instead of passion. Relationships built on performance instead of honesty, and decisions driven more by the fear of rejection than by genuine desire. Freedom begins the moment you stop asking, "How should I appear?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming?" That single shift changes everything. It moves your attention away from pleasing others and toward understanding yourself. This does not mean rejecting every tradition or ignoring every social expectation. Wisdom lies in choosing consciously rather than obeying automatically. Keep what strengthens your character. Let go of what only limits your growth. And when you finally make that choice, you discover that breaking free is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a far greater transformation, one that changes the way you see yourself and everyone around you. From that moment forward, you stop measuring your worth by how perfectly you fit a role. Instead, you begin measuring it by how honestly you express your character. You no longer waste energy proving your masculinity or femininity. Your focus shifts toward developing wisdom, emotional intelligence, courage, discipline, and compassion, qualities that belong to every complete human being. This is the deeper lesson behind the law of gender rigidity. The greatest limitations are rarely imposed by nature. More often, they are created by unquestioned beliefs that have been passed from one generation to the next. The moment you examine those beliefs, instead of blindly accepting them, you reclaim a part of yourself that has been waiting to emerge. People who achieve lasting influence are not remembered because they perfectly matched society's expectations. They are remembered because they understood themselves. They embraced complexity instead of hiding from it, and they allowed their character, not outdated stereotypes, to define their actions. So ask yourself one final question. Which part of your authentic self have you been suppressing simply because you were told it didn't belong to you? The answer may reveal the very quality that has been missing from your life all along. Because real power is never found in becoming the person the world expects you to be. It is found in having the courage to become the person you were always capable of becoming. And with that understanding, we can now turn to the next law, one that explores what happens when a life is lived without a clear direction or purpose. Chapter 13, The Law of Aimlessness. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to move through life with quiet confidence, while others stay busy every single day, yet never feel as though they're truly moving forward? The difference is rarely intelligence, talent, or luck. More often it begins with something far less visible, a clear sense of direction. Most people never consciously choose the path they're walking. They simply follow the next opportunity, the next expectation, or the next distraction. One decision leads to another until years have passed, and they suddenly realize they've been living a life they never intentionally designed. This is how aimlessness quietly takes control. It doesn't announce itself through failure. It disguises itself as comfort, routine, and endless activity. You stay occupied, believing you're making progress, when in reality, you're only moving in circles. The greatest danger isn't wasting a single day. It's wasting years while convincing yourself that you're still on the right path. Ask yourself one honest question. If every outside expectation disappeared tomorrow, would you still be living the life you're living today? Most people hesitate before answering because deep down they already know the truth. A life without direction doesn't usually collapse overnight. It slowly drifts, pulled by other people's priorities instead of your own. And the moment you allow your future to be shaped by chance rather than purpose, an invisible force begins making your most important decisions for you. That force is momentum. Once your life starts moving in a certain direction, the mind naturally resists changing course. Familiar routines become comfortable even when they no longer serve you. You mistake consistency for progress and movement for meaning. This is why so many people wake up years later feeling trapped inside a life they never consciously chose. They didn't make one catastrophic decision. They made hundreds of small, unquestioned ones, each pulling them a little farther away from their true purpose. The modern world only amplifies this problem. Every notification, every trend, every opinion competes for your attention. Your focus becomes fragmented, and without realizing it, you begin living reactively instead of intentionally. Attention is the most valuable resource you possess. Wherever it goes, your future quietly follows. Highly successful people understand this principle. They don't say yes to every opportunity. They protect their attention because they know that every unnecessary distraction carries a hidden cost. Every moment spent chasing what doesn't matter is a moment stolen from what does. Aimlessness is rarely caused by a lack of ability. More often, it is the result of scattered attention and undefined priorities. And before you can discover the direction your life truly demands, you must first understand why your mind is so easily pulled away from it in the first place. The human mind is naturally drawn toward what feels immediate, exciting, and effortless. It craves novelty, quick rewards, and the comfort of avoiding uncertainty. A meaningful purpose, however, demands something very different. It requires patience, discipline, and the willingness to keep moving even when the results are invisible. This is where most people lose their way. They confuse temporary motivation with lasting commitment. They chase whatever feels exciting today, only to abandon it when the excitement fades. Soon another opportunity appears, then another and another. Their life becomes a collection of unfinished beginnings instead of meaningful achievements. Purpose is not discovered by constantly changing direction. It is revealed through consistent effort in a direction that truly matters. Look at the people who create extraordinary work. They are not immune to distraction. They simply refuse to let distraction decide the course of their lives. They understand that every meaningful goal requires sacrificing countless attractive alternatives. Clarity grows through action, not endless thinking. Every intentional step teaches you something that hesitation never can. The greatest obstacle is rarely a lack of talent. It is the habit of dividing your energy among too many directions until none of them receives enough attention to grow. And once you recognize the true cost of a scattered life, one final question remains, a question that determines whether your future will be shaped by intention or by accident. What is worthy of your life's energy? Very few people ever answer that question with complete honesty. Instead, they allow circumstances to decide for them. They chase approval instead of purpose, comfort instead of growth, and short-term pleasure instead of long-term fulfillment. At first, the difference seems insignificant. Over time, it becomes the difference between a meaningful life and a distracted one. Purpose is not something you find overnight. It is something you build through deliberate choices repeated every single day. Every decision either strengthens your direction or weakens it. This is why discipline is far more valuable than motivation. Motivation rises and falls with emotion, but discipline continues long after the excitement has disappeared. It keeps you moving when progress feels slow and reminds you why you started in the first place. The people who accomplish extraordinary things are not always the most gifted. More often, they are the ones who refuse to abandon their path when distractions become more appealing than their purpose. The question is no longer whether you have potential. The real question is whether you are willing to protect that potential from everything that tries to steal it. Because the moment you make that commitment, your relationship with time, attention, and success begins to change forever. You no longer wake up wondering what life expects from you. Instead, you begin asking what your purpose demands from you. That single shift transforms the way you think, decide, and act. Every choice becomes intentional because it serves a direction greater than temporary comfort. This is the deeper lesson behind the law of aimlessness. A meaningful life is not created by chance. It is created through clarity, discipline, and the courage to remain committed when distractions promise an easier path. There will always be people chasing the next trend, the next opportunity, or the next shortcut. But those who leave a lasting impact understand that success is rarely the result of doing more. It is the result of doing what truly matters consistently for a long enough time. So ask yourself one final question. If your actions over the next 5 years remain exactly as they are today, where will they lead you? Your answer reveals more than your hopes. It reveals your direction. The future is never built in a single dramatic moment. It is built through the quiet decisions you repeat every day. Especially when no one is watching. Choose those decisions wisely because your habits are writing the story your future will one day tell. And with that understanding, we are ready to explore the next law, one that reveals why even intelligent people often surrender their individuality to the influence of the crowd. Chapter 14. The Law of Conformity. Have you ever noticed how easily people change their opinions when they find themselves surrounded by a crowd? A person who thinks independently while alone may suddenly become silent in a group, agreeing with ideas they would normally question. It happens so naturally that most never realize it. The need to belong is one of the oldest forces in human nature. Thousands of years ago, acceptance by the tribe meant survival. Rejection often meant isolation, danger, or death. Although the world has changed, your brain still carries that ancient programming. It constantly watches for signs of approval, searching for the safety that comes from fitting in. This is why conformity is so powerful. It rarely forces you to obey. Instead, it quietly persuades you to believe that following the majority is the safest choice. Little by little, your opinions begin to mirror the people around you. You stop asking whether something is true and start asking whether it is popular. The danger is not that other people influence you. Influence is unavoidable. The danger begins when you surrender your ability to think for yourself. History has shown that entire societies can embrace harmful ideas simply because few people have the courage to stand apart. The crowd creates confidence, but confidence is not the same as truth. The moment you begin valuing acceptance more than independent thought, you unknowingly place your mind in someone else's hands. And that silent surrender becomes the first step toward losing your individuality. Losing your individuality rarely happens in a single dramatic moment. It happens through countless small compromises that seem harmless at the time. You laugh at opinions you don't truly share, stay silent when you should speak, and gradually reshape your beliefs to avoid rejection. The human mind is deeply influenced by social proof. When enough people believe something, it begins to feel true, even when the evidence says otherwise. The crowd offers certainty, and certainty is comforting. Questioning the majority, on the other hand, demands courage, and courage is always uncomfortable. History repeatedly reminds us of this pattern. Great discoveries, revolutionary ideas, and meaningful progress almost always began with individuals who refused to accept popular opinion as unquestionable truth. They were criticized, ignored, or even ridiculed before they were understood. This is why independent thinking is so rare. It requires the willingness to stand alone long enough for the truth to reveal itself. Yet conformity is not always obvious. Sometimes it hides behind traditions, workplace culture, social media trends, or the expectations of family and friends. The pressure is often invisible, making it even more powerful. The question is not whether you are influenced by others. You are. The real question is whether that influence helps you grow or quietly steals your ability to think for yourself. The answer becomes clear only when you discover the subtle psychological forces that convince ordinary people to surrender their judgment without ever realizing it. Those psychological forces are far more subtle than most people imagine. They rarely rely on threats or direct pressure. Instead, they work through the emotions you experience every day. The desire to be accepted, the fear of standing out, and the discomfort of being judged. Once these emotions take control, the mind begins searching for agreement rather than truth. You start adopting opinions because they feel socially safe, not because you have carefully examined them. Over time, borrowed beliefs become so familiar that you mistake them for your own. Modern technology has intensified this process. Every day, millions of people are surrounded by algorithms, headlines, viral trends, and endless opinions competing for their attention. The more often an idea is repeated, the more believable it begins to feel. Familiarity quietly disguises itself as truth. This is why intelligent people are not immune to conformity. Knowledge alone does not protect the mind. Without awareness, even highly educated individuals can follow the crowd while believing they are making independent decisions. True independence begins with a simple habit: pausing before agreeing. Ask yourself whether a belief is supported by evidence or whether it merely echoes the voices around you. That brief moment of reflection creates space for genuine thought. The strongest minds are not those that reject every popular idea. They are the ones that examine every idea before accepting it. And once you develop that habit, another challenge emerges: finding the courage to stay true to your convictions when the crowd refuses to stand beside you. Finding the courage to stand by your convictions is often far more difficult than discovering the truth itself. The greatest test of independent thinking begins when your beliefs are challenged by the people whose approval you value most. Very few individuals enjoy standing alone. Your mind naturally seeks harmony because disagreement can feel like rejection. As a result, many people abandon their convictions long before they have truly examined them. They trade authenticity for acceptance, believing that fitting in is the safest path. But history tells a different story. The individuals who transformed science, philosophy, business, and society were rarely celebrated at the beginning. They were questioned, criticized, and often misunderstood because they chose evidence over popularity and principle over comfort. Their willingness to think independently became the source of their greatest influence. This does not mean you should oppose the crowd simply to appear different. Blind rebellion is no wiser than blind conformity. Real wisdom lies in judging every idea on its own merits, regardless of whether it is accepted by one person or by millions. When your opinions are built on careful observation, honest reflection, and sound reasoning, you no longer need the crowd's approval to feel certain. Confidence grows from understanding, not from agreement. The moment you stop borrowing your beliefs from others, you begin reclaiming ownership of your own mind. And once that ownership is restored, you are finally prepared to understand the lasting reward that comes from thinking with courage instead of simply following the crowd. Thinking with courage does not mean isolating yourself from the world. It means refusing to let the world do your thinking for you. Listen carefully, observe openly, and remain willing to learn, but never surrender your judgment simply because an opinion is popular. This is the deeper lesson behind the law of conformity. The crowd can offer comfort, but it cannot replace truth. Real growth begins the moment you stop measuring your beliefs by the number of people who agree with them and start measuring them by evidence, reason, and experience. The strongest minds are neither stubborn nor easily persuaded. They remain open enough to change when presented with better evidence, yet disciplined enough to resist pressure when popularity replaces wisdom. That balance is the foundation of genuine independence. Ask yourself one final question. If everyone around you believed the exact opposite of what you believe today, would you still have the courage to defend your convictions? Your answer reveals whether your beliefs truly belong to you, or whether they belong to the crowd. The future is shaped by individuals who dare to think clearly when others simply follow. Every meaningful breakthrough, every lasting innovation, and every courageous decision begins with one person who chooses truth over approval. And with that understanding, we are ready to explore the next law, one that reveals why human loyalty, emotions, and opinions can change far more quickly than most people ever expect. Chapter 15, The Law of Fickleness. Why do people promise loyalty one day and disappear the next? Why does admiration so often transform into disappointment and certainty into doubt? We like to believe that human emotions are stable, yet history and our own lives tell a very different story. The human heart is remarkably inconsistent. Feelings shift, priorities change, and opinions that once seemed unshakable can disappear almost overnight. One of the greatest mistakes you can make is assuming that people will always feel tomorrow the way they feel today. Affection fades, enthusiasm weakens, resentment grows, and trust can be strengthened or broken by a series of small experiences that often go unnoticed. Human nature is constantly moving, even when it appears perfectly still. This is the essence of the law of fickleness. Most people search for certainty in relationships, friendships, careers, and even public opinion. They expect consistency from others because consistency makes the world feel predictable. But expecting permanent emotions from imperfect human beings almost always leads to disappointment. Think about the people who once inspired you. Some may no longer hold the same place in your mind. Think about opinions you defended with complete confidence years ago. Many of them have likely changed as your experiences changed. This isn't necessarily a weakness, it's a reminder that the human mind is always adapting to new circumstances. The real danger begins when you ignore this reality. You become surprised by betrayal, shocked by changing loyalties, and confused when admiration suddenly turns into criticism. In truth, these shifts rarely happen without warning. They develop quietly, hidden beneath everyday interactions, until the change becomes impossible to ignore. Those who understand human nature never become prisoners of temporary emotions. They recognize that people's words matter, but their patterns matter far more. Instead of judging someone by a single promise or a single moment of enthusiasm, they observe the consistency of actions over time. And the moment you begin watching patterns instead of promises, you start seeing people with a level of clarity that most never achieve. Seeing people through their patterns rather than their promises changes the way you understand every relationship. Words are often shaped by emotion, but patterns reveal character. A person may speak with confidence today and make sincere commitments, yet tomorrow a new emotion, a different opportunity, or an unexpected fear can completely reshape their behavior. This is because emotions are temporary, while human nature is adaptive. People naturally adjust to changing circumstances, often without realizing how dramatically their priorities have shifted. What once felt deeply important can slowly lose its emotional weight, replaced by new desires, new fears, or new ambitions. Many relationships don't end because of one dramatic event. They weaken through small moments of neglect, unspoken disappointment, and gradually changing priorities. The transformation is so subtle that both people often believe nothing has changed, until the distance between them becomes impossible to ignore. The same pattern appears in every area of life. Public opinion changes, friendships evolve, leaders rise and fall. Trends that seem permanent disappear within months. The world is constantly reminding you that loyalty built only on emotion is rarely permanent. This does not mean you should become cynical or stop trusting people. It means you should understand them more realistically. Appreciate loyalty when it is supported by consistent actions, not by temporary enthusiasm alone. The wiser you become, the less you judge people by what they say in a single moment. Instead, you learn to observe how they behave across many moments, especially when circumstances become difficult. Because it is during those difficult moments that the true nature of loyalty and the hidden forces that constantly reshape human emotions begin to reveal themselves. Difficult moments have a way of revealing what comfortable moments often conceal. When life is easy, loyalty requires very little effort, but when pressure, uncertainty, or personal sacrifice enters the picture, emotions begin to shift, and true character becomes impossible to hide. This is why wise observers never mistake temporary excitement for lasting commitment. They understand that people are influenced by changing emotions, personal interests, social pressure, and the desire to protect themselves. These invisible forces can quietly alter decisions that once seemed certain. History is filled with examples of trusted allies becoming rivals and devoted supporters walking away when circumstances changed. The lesson is not that people are naturally dishonest. The lesson is that human emotions are rarely fixed. They respond to success and failure, fear and hope, gain and loss. Understanding this truth changes the way you deal with others. Instead of expecting perfect consistency, you begin looking for emotional maturity, integrity, and self-awareness. These qualities are far more reliable than passionate promises or impressive words. The strongest relationships are not built on feelings that never change. They are built on shared values, mutual respect, and the discipline to remain committed even when emotions fluctuate. Feelings may rise and fall, but character determines whether a person stays true to what truly matters. Once you stop expecting people to remain exactly the same forever, disappointment loses much of its power. You begin responding to reality instead of clinging to unrealistic expectations. And when you accept that human emotions are always in motion, you become ready to discover the deeper principle that separates lasting influence from temporary approval. Lasting influence is never built on temporary approval. It is built on the ability to remain steady while the emotions of others continue to change. People may praise you today, criticize you tomorrow, and admire you again months later. If your confidence rises and falls with their opinions, your life will always be controlled by forces outside your control. This is why emotionally intelligent people never become addicted to applause. They understand that public opinion is constantly shifting. The same crowd that celebrates success can quickly lose interest when circumstances change. Seeking permanent validation from constantly changing emotions is a battle that no one can truly win. Instead of chasing approval, focus on earning respect. Approval is emotional and temporary. Respect is built through integrity, competence, and consistent actions repeated over time. While admiration may come and go, genuine respect has the power to endure. The same principle applies to your own emotions. You should never make life's biggest decisions based on what you happen to feel in a single moment. Excitement can cloud judgment just as fear can. Wisdom comes from allowing emotions to settle before making choices that shape your future. The more you understand the changing nature of human feelings, the less likely you are to overreact when people disappoint you or overestimate their promises. You begin seeing emotional change as a natural part of life rather than a personal betrayal. And once you stop expecting stability from emotions, you can finally build your life upon something far stronger: character, purpose, and principles that remain steady even when feelings do not. Character, purpose, and principles are the only foundations that remain steady when emotions begin to change. Everything else, admiration, excitement, popularity, and even loyalty, can rise and fall with time and circumstance. The more deeply you understand this, the less control temporary emotions have over your decisions. This is the deeper lesson behind the law of fickleness. Human beings are emotional, adaptable, and constantly evolving. Expecting people to remain exactly the same forever is not wisdom, it is wishful thinking. Real wisdom comes from accepting change without becoming cynical. Observe people patiently, listen carefully to what they say, but place even greater value on what they consistently do. Over time, actions reveal intentions, habits expose character, and repeated choices uncover the truth that emotions often hide. Now ask yourself one final question. Are your most important decisions guided by temporary feelings or by principles that will still matter years from now? The answer to that question shapes every relationship you build, every opportunity you pursue, and every challenge you overcome. Those who master this law are not surprised when emotions change. They remain calm, adapt wisely, and continue moving forward without allowing shifting opinions or passing feelings to define their future. Because lasting success has never belonged to those who followed every emotion. It belongs to those who remained faithful to their character long after emotions have changed. And with that understanding, we are ready to explore the next law. One that reveals why aggression is often hidden behind calm faces and polite words, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Chapter 16. The Law of Aggression. Why do calm, polite people sometimes explode with unexpected anger? Why do seemingly harmless conflicts suddenly become personal battles? Most people believe aggression belongs only to the loud, the violent, or the openly hostile. But human nature tells a different story. Aggression rarely begins with raised voices or physical force. It begins quietly, hidden beneath pride, insecurity, frustration, and the silent desire to protect the ego. From an early age, we're taught to suppress anger because it is seen as dangerous or unacceptable. We learn to smile when we're hurt, remain silent when we're insulted, and avoid conflict to preserve peace. While self-control is valuable, constantly bearing aggression doesn't eliminate it. It simply drives it beneath the surface, where it continues to grow in ways we rarely notice. This is the essence of the law of aggression. Every unresolved frustration leaves a mark on the mind. Every ignored resentment quietly accumulates. Over time, these emotional pressures begin shaping your reactions, your decisions, and even the way you interpret other people's intentions. A harmless comment starts to feel like an attack. A small disagreement feels deeply personal. Without realizing it, you're no longer responding to the present moment. You're reacting to emotions that have been building for months or even years. The most dangerous forms of aggression are often invisible. They appear as passive resistance, sarcasm, manipulation, silent resentment, or the quiet satisfaction of seeing someone else fail. Because these behaviors rarely look aggressive on the surface, people justify them instead of confronting the emotions that created them. The first step toward mastering aggression is recognizing that it is not a flaw possessed by a few people. It is a universal force that exists within every human being. The difference lies in whether you allow it to control your actions or learn to understand it before it controls your life. And the moment you stop fearing your own aggression, you become capable of discovering where it truly comes from and why understanding its hidden source is the beginning of real emotional strength. The hidden source of aggression is rarely the situation in front of you. More often, it is the emotional burden you've been carrying long before the conflict ever began. A single comment, a minor disappointment, or a small act of disrespect becomes the spark. But the fire was already there. This is why two people can experience the same event and react in completely different ways. One responds with calm and clarity, while the other reacts with intense anger. The difference is not the event itself, it is the emotional history each person brings into that moment. Unresolved frustration has a remarkable ability to distort perception. The mind begins assuming the worst, interpreting neutral actions as personal attacks and ordinary disagreements as deliberate acts of disrespect. Once aggression shapes your perception, reality itself becomes difficult to judge objectively. Many people believe they lose control because someone else provoked them. In truth, other people often reveal emotions that were already waiting beneath the surface. They expose wounds that have never fully healed. This is why emotional awareness is far more powerful than emotional suppression. Ignoring anger does not make it disappear. It only forces it to find another path. Through bitterness, passive aggression, resentment, or sudden emotional outbursts that seem to come from nowhere. The strongest individuals are not those who never feel aggressive. They are the ones who recognize the emotion before it takes control, examine its true cause, and choose a response instead of reacting on instinct. And once you understand how aggression quietly reshapes your perception, you begin to see the deeper psychological patterns that keep this invisible force alive for years without ever being questioned. Those hidden psychological patterns often begin forming long before we recognize them. Childhood experiences, repeated disappointments, humiliation, rejection, and unresolved emotional pain leave lasting impressions on the mind. Although the memories may fade, the emotional patterns often remain, quietly influencing the way we react to the world. When similar situations appear later in life, the mind doesn't always respond to the present moment. Instead, it reactivates old emotional wounds. A simple disagreement may feel like a personal attack. Honest criticism may be interpreted as rejection. Without realizing it, you begin fighting yesterday's battles in today's relationships. This is why aggression is so often misunderstood. What appears to be anger is frequently fear, insecurity, shame, or the desperate need to protect a wounded ego. The emotion on the surface is rarely the emotion at the center. People who understand this become far more difficult to provoke. They learn to pause before reacting, asking themselves whether the situation truly deserves such a strong response, or whether an older wound has quietly taken control of the moment. This single habit changes everything. Instead of allowing emotion to dictate behavior, they create space for awareness. That brief pause weakens the automatic cycle of aggression and strengthens emotional intelligence. Mastering aggression does not mean becoming passive or avoiding conflict. It means responding with intention rather than impulse, using strength with self-control instead of allowing anger to make decisions for you. And once you develop that level of awareness, you discover the difference between aggression that destroys and strength that protects. a distinction that separates emotionally reactive people from emotionally disciplined ones. The difference between aggression that destroys and strength that protects is self-mastery. Anyone can react in anger, but very few people possess the discipline to remain composed when their emotions demand immediate action. That is where real power begins. Aggression becomes dangerous when it controls your decisions instead of serving your principles. In moments of intense emotion, the mind seeks quick relief rather than wise judgment. It wants to strike back, prove a point, or regain a sense of control. Yet the actions taken in those moments often create consequences that last far longer than the emotion itself. History has shown that some of the greatest failures were not caused by a lack of intelligence, but by a single uncontrolled emotional reaction. One impulsive decision can damage years of trust, destroy valuable relationships, or close opportunities that may never return. This is why emotional discipline is not a weakness, it is one of the highest forms of strength. People who command lasting respect understand this truth. They do not suppress their anger until it explodes, nor do they express every emotion the moment it appears. Instead, they learn to channel aggression into determination, courage, and purposeful action. The same inner force that can destroy a life can also become the energy that builds one. The goal is not to eliminate aggression, because that is impossible. The goal is to transform it into something useful, something guided by wisdom instead of impulse. And when you learn to direct that energy rather than fear it, you are prepared to uncover the final lesson that turns aggression from an enemy into one of your greatest sources of inner strength. The final lesson of the law of aggression is that the same force capable of destroying your life can also become the force that transforms it. Aggression, by itself, is neither good nor bad. It is raw human energy. Left unchecked, it fuels resentment, revenge, and impulsive decisions. Guided by self-awareness, it becomes courage, determination, resilience, and the willingness to protect what truly matters. The people who achieve lasting influence are not those who never experience anger. They are the ones who refuse to let anger become their master. They recognize the emotion, understand its source, and deliberately choose a response that aligns with their values instead of their impulses. Ask yourself one final question. When anger appears, does it control your actions or does it reveal an opportunity to strengthen your character? Your answer says far more about your future than the emotion itself. Every conflict you face offers two paths. One is driven by instinct, where aggression demands immediate satisfaction. The other is guided by wisdom, where discipline transforms emotional energy into thoughtful action. The path you choose shapes not only your relationships, but the person you become. True strength has never been measured by the power to intimidate others. It has always been measured by the ability to master yourself when emotions are at their strongest, because the greatest victory is never over another person. It is over the part of yourself that wants to react before it chooses to understand. And with that understanding, we are ready to explore the next law, one that reveals why people instinctively compare themselves with others, and how that silent habit shapes ambition, envy, and the course of an entire life. Chapter 17. The Law of Generational Myopia. Every generation believes it is witnessing a completely new world. New technology, new ideas, new values, and new conflicts create the illusion that history has been left behind. Yet beneath these changes, human nature remains remarkably consistent. The emotions that drove people centuries ago, ambition, fear, envy, pride, and the desire for belonging, continue to shape every generation today. This is where generational myopia begins. We become so focused on what appears new that we fail to recognize the timeless patterns repeating before our eyes. We mistake temporary trends for permanent change and assume the future will be fundamentally different from the past. History quietly warns us otherwise. Every era has celebrated its progress while underestimating the forces that never disappear. Societies rise through discipline, innovation, and cooperation, then often weaken through overconfidence and short-term thinking. The faces change, the technology changes, but the underlying human behaviors remain strikingly familiar. Those who understand this law develop an extraordinary advantage. Instead of reacting to every trend or panic, they learn to recognize recurring patterns hidden beneath changing circumstances. They understand that wisdom comes not from chasing every new idea, but from seeing what history has been trying to teach all along. And the moment you begin looking beyond the surface of your own generation, you start seeing the future with far greater clarity than most people ever will. Seeing beyond your own generation requires more than intelligence, it requires perspective. Most people judge the world only through the events they have personally experienced. They assume today's problems are unprecedented and today's solutions are permanent, yet history reveals a different truth. Every generation faces its own version of the same human struggles. Economic booms create confidence, followed by periods of uncertainty. New leaders inspire hope, only to face criticism as expectations change. Revolutionary ideas challenge old beliefs, and over time, those same ideas become traditions that the next generation questions once again. The cycle continues because human nature remains constant even when circumstances evolve. The greatest mistake is believing that progress makes us immune to the lessons of the past. Technology may advance, but fear, ambition, status, and the need for meaning continue to guide human behavior just as they always have. People who recognize these recurring patterns are less likely to be swept away by temporary excitement or widespread panic. They pause, compare the present with the past, and ask a simple question: what has changed and what has not? That single habit transforms the way they make decisions. Instead of reacting to headlines, they begin recognizing the deeper forces shaping every generation. And once you learn to separate timeless human nature from temporary cultural change, another powerful pattern begins to reveal itself, one that explains why generations so often misunderstand one another. The conflict between generations rarely begins with facts. It begins with perspective. Every generation believes its values are more practical, more enlightened, or more relevant than those of the one before it. As a result, experience is often dismissed as outdated, while new ideas are accepted simply because they feel modern. This misunderstanding creates an invisible divide. Older generations may view change as a threat to stability, while younger generations often see tradition as a barrier to progress. Both sides focus on their differences and overlook the deeper truth. Each generation is responding to the same human needs for security, purpose, recognition, and belonging. History shows that societies grow stronger when generations learn from one another instead of competing with one another. Experience provides wisdom, while fresh thinking creates innovation. Neither is complete without the other. The wisest individuals resist the temptation to glorify the past or worship the future. They recognize that every era offers valuable lessons, but none possesses all the answers. When you stop judging people by the generation they belong to and begin understanding the timeless motivations that drive them, your view of the world becomes far more balanced. And that balanced perspective reveals the final lesson of this law, one that separates those who simply witness history from those who learn to anticipate it. Anticipating history begins with recognizing that every generation leaves behind both strengths and blind spots. The greatest danger is not repeating the past. It is believing that your generation is incapable of repeating it. That belief creates overconfidence, and overconfidence has been the starting point of countless historical mistakes. When people become convinced that they have finally solved the problems of human nature, they stop questioning their assumptions. They ignore warning signs, dismiss opposing views, and place too much faith in temporary success. Yet history repeatedly reminds us that no generation is exempt from error. True wisdom comes from remaining curious rather than certain. Instead of asking, "Why did previous generations fail?" ask, "How could my generation make the same mistake in a different form?" That single question replaces arrogance with awareness. The people who see further than others are not those who can predict every event. They are the ones who recognize recurring patterns before they become obvious. They understand that technology may transform the world, but fear, ambition, pride, and the desire for power continue to influence human decisions in every age. Once you develop that historical perspective, you stop reacting to the moment and begin thinking across generations. And with that shift in perspective, you are ready to uncover the final principle that turns history into one of the greatest teachers of human nature. History becomes your greatest teacher only when you stop seeing it as a collection of dates and begin seeing it as a study of human nature. Every generation believes it is creating a completely new story. Yet beneath the surface, the same emotions continue to shape human behavior. The names, technologies, and cultures change, but ambition, fear, pride, hope, and the search for meaning remain remarkably constant. This is the deeper lesson behind the law of generational myopia. The future does not belong to those who ignore the past, nor to those who live trapped within it. It belongs to those who understand its patterns and apply those lessons with wisdom. Ask yourself one final question. If history has repeated itself for centuries, what makes you so certain your generation will be different? That question is not meant to create doubt. It is meant to create humility. The more humble your perspective becomes, the more clearly you recognize opportunities, avoid predictable mistakes, and make decisions that endure beyond your own lifetime. Those who understand history are not merely prepared for the future, they help shape it. And with that understanding, we are ready to explore the next law, one that reveals why death, though unavoidable, can become one of the greatest forces for living with purpose. Chapter 18. The Law of Death Denial. There is one truth every human being shares, yet almost no one is willing to face it. We organize our lives around avoiding it, distracting ourselves from it, and pretending it belongs to some distant future. But whether we acknowledge it or not, it quietly shapes every decision we make. That truth is our own mortality. Most people treat death as an uncomfortable subject, believing that ignoring it somehow makes life easier. In reality, the opposite is true. The more we deny death, the more we become prisoners of fear. We cling to comfort, postpone our dreams, avoid difficult conversations, and waste precious time believing there will always be another opportunity. This is the essence of the law of death denial. Human beings possess a unique awareness that life is finite. That awareness can either become a source of anxiety or the greatest source of purpose. The difference lies in whether we choose to escape from mortality or learn from it. History reveals that the men and women who left the deepest mark on the world did not live as though time were endless. They understood that every day carried weight because it could never be repeated. Rather than allowing the certainty of death to weaken them, they allowed it to sharpen their priorities, deepen their courage, and give meaning to every action. The tragedy is not that life eventually ends. The tragedy is that so many people begin truly living only after realizing how little time they have left. By then, countless opportunities have already disappeared. When you stop treating death as an enemy and begin accepting it as life's greatest teacher, your perspective changes completely. Petty distractions lose their power. Fear begins to fade. What truly matters becomes impossible to ignore. And the moment you accept that your time is limited, you discover a freedom that only those who embrace mortality can ever understand. That freedom begins the moment you stop measuring life by how long it lasts and start measuring it by how deeply it is lived. Most people assume they have plenty of time, so they postpone meaningful goals, delay difficult decisions, and wait for the perfect moment that rarely arrives. In doing so, they unknowingly surrender the only resource they can never recover. Death gives life its urgency. Without limits, purpose would disappear. It is the awareness that time is finite which makes love more precious, opportunities more valuable, and every meaningful choice more significant. Yet modern life constantly encourages distraction. Endless entertainment, endless comparison, and endless busyness create the illusion of progress while quietly consuming irreplaceable years. Days become routines, routines become years, and many people wake up wondering where their lives went. Those who understand mortality refuse to live on autopilot. They ask themselves difficult questions. Am I spending my time on what truly matters? Am I building a life I would be proud to remember? These questions shift attention away from temporary pleasures and toward lasting purpose. Accepting death is not an invitation to fear. It is an invitation to live with greater intention, gratitude, and courage. Every sunrise becomes a reminder that another opportunity has been given, and every decision becomes a reflection of the legacy you are creating. And once you begin valuing time as your most precious possession, an even deeper truth about mortality begins to reveal itself. The deeper truth about mortality is that it does more than remind us our time is limited. It reveals what truly deserves our attention. When you accept that every moment is finite, your priorities begin to change. The desire to impress others weakens, while the desire to live with meaning grows stronger. Many of the fears that dominate everyday life begin to lose their power. The fear of failure becomes smaller than the regret of never trying. The fear of criticism matters less than the cost of remaining silent. Slowly, you stop living for approval and start living according to your deepest values. This shift is what separates people who merely exist from those who leave a lasting impact. They understand that wealth, status, and recognition are temporary, but character, wisdom, and the lives they influence can outlive them. Mortality also transforms the way we see other people. Every person you meet is fighting the same invisible battle against time. This realization replaces arrogance with humility, resentment with compassion, and impatience with understanding. The purpose of reflecting on death is never to become consumed by it. The purpose is to become fully awake to life. When you stop pretending tomorrow is guaranteed, today becomes infinitely more valuable. And once you begin living with that awareness, you uncover the final lesson of this law, one that explains why accepting death is ultimately the greatest celebration of life itself. The greatest celebration of life begins when you stop treating death as a distant event and start allowing it to guide your choices today. This awareness does not make life darker, it makes it clearer. It strips away illusions and forces you to confront what is truly worth your limited time. Many people spend years chasing approval, possessions, or endless comfort, believing these things will bring lasting fulfillment. Yet when confronted with mortality, those pursuits often lose their importance. What remains meaningful are the moments of courage, the relationships built with sincerity, the wisdom gained through experience, and the positive impact left on others. This is why reflecting on death can become one of the most powerful practices for personal growth. It reminds you that every argument does not deserve your energy, every distraction does not deserve your attention, and every fear does not deserve your obedience. People who accept this truth develop a rare sense of clarity. They stop postponing meaningful work, speak honestly, forgive more easily, and act with greater purpose because they understand that time is life's most valuable gift. Living with mortality in mind is not about expecting the end, it is about refusing to waste the present. And when you embrace that perspective, you become ready for the final insight that transforms the fear of death into the deepest appreciation for life. The deepest appreciation for life is born the moment you stop running from death. Mortality is not life's greatest enemy, it is its greatest reminder. It reminds you that every sunrise is a gift, every meaningful conversation is irreplaceable, and every decision becomes part of the legacy you leave behind. This is the ultimate lesson of the law of death denial. The people who live the fullest lives are not those who ignore death, but those who allow the awareness of it to shape how they think, love, create, and lead. They understand that time is life's only non-renewable resource, and they refuse to spend it on fear, resentment, or meaningless distractions. Ask yourself one final question. If today were your last ordinary day, would you be proud of the way you chose to live it? That question is not meant to create fear. It is meant to awaken purpose. When you stop assuming there will always be another tomorrow, you begin giving your best to today. You become more courageous, more grateful, more compassionate, and more intentional with every choice you make. Because in the end, the measure of a life is never the number of years you lived. It is the depth of your character, the lives you touched, and the purpose you fulfilled while you were here. And that is the final wisdom of the laws of human nature. To understand yourself, understand others, and live each day with the clarity that only the awareness of mortality can provide.